Hello and welcome to Six Part. Today I'm gonna continue the story. What if Deku had the Sharingan? Part 3. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
Ahem. Principal Nezu, do you have any commentary before we begin? Aizawa said, clearing his throat straight into the microphone. Now, Shota. You sound so robotic. Try not to speak like you're reading off of note cards, the teacher said. I am reading off of note cards. The note cards you wrote for. Semantics. Nezu yelled. Anywho, I have absolutely no idea who either of these two students are, so why don't you take care of the commentary, Eraserhead? Then why did you write me a card asking you to commentate? No response was found. All right, Bakugo is a true combat genius. His physicality, instincts, and quirk are all ideal for fighting. His greatest weakness is his ferocity, which is actually more of a strength than a weakness in this tournament. Conversely, Midoriya is an analytical combatant. He is ideal for counter-attacking because of his quirk and innate wait-and-see attitude. But he has a tendency to lose his cool and give it his all if and when he feels overburdened. Nezu's voice interrupted abruptly. Ooh, now I can recall him. I take it he's the reason our infirmary is so understocked these days? And One for All was passed on by the All Might. Yeah, Midoriya's quirk tends to backfire. Aizawa's tone betrayed his displeasure, and the teacher's voice soon followed, adding, but so far, his performance today is miles ahead of where he was just a few weeks ago. Wow, Eraserhead's nice remarks. Do you believe he will prevail today? No, would you mind explaining why? These two have a history, Aizawa said, groaning but giving in. Dominance is a fierce motivator for Bakugo. It's a desperate attempt on Midoriya's part to match the other. Specifically, Bakugo is trying to win and Midoriya is trying to establish himself in the conflict between the two. Although one is undoubtedly more honorable than the other, it won't help much when your opponent is determined to destroy you. It must have been interesting, judging by the audience's response, but Bakugo couldn't be bothered to pay attention, so he stretched his legs out with his elbows while his teacher and the principal continued their commentary. He had been waiting for this fight since the battle trial, and he had no intention of getting sidetracked now. In fact, he may have been waiting for this fight since he was 4 years old, when he stood in that river with his best friend, staring down his outstretched arm. I'm jealous of you, that's why. His opponent, who was also getting in a last-minute stretch, had an expression as determined as Bakugo's when their eyes locked. I'll prove to you that I'm better than you. Bakugo was by no means a moron. He knew what Deku was feeling, why he continued to pursue him after 10 years of abuse and torture, and that their argument at the Ua gates had ensured that. He also understood that this battle was not about figuring out what their specific problems were. Bakugo understood Midoriya's jealous admiration, and Midoriya understood Bakugo's inferiority complex. They weren't playing cards in this battle, it had to do with getting the damn game done. Kachan. When Midoriya finished his warm-up, he stood up straight and said, You told me I wasn't a match for you back then. I will demonstrate to you my progress since then. Please, Bakugo sneered. You believe you are strong enough to defeat me because you are a little quicker and your hand glows. Go away. In 2 moves, I'll finish you. Class A took a collective breath in the stands. Dude, this is my second least favorite matchup ever. Kaminari shuddered. These two are insane. Who do you dislike the most? With earphone jacks ready in case he said something problematic, Jiro asked. Dude. Todoroki and Bakugo. They would ruin the stadium. I can sense how tense those two are, Kirishima gulped. That is incredibly manly. Uraraka hammered her fists, saying, You know what? Who do you support, Kirishima? Geez, I have no idea. Bakugo is my bro. Even though Midoriya is my guy, it's quite difficult. Mina jabbed at his cheek. Kiri, boo. That's not enjoyable. I take it that we are all members of the Baku squad? We must stand by our leader? Baku squad. Uraraka inclined her cranium. Cute, huh? Mina nodded enthusiastically. I just thought of it, Kiri, Kaminari, Siro, and I are there. And, of course, Bakugo. How did I end up involved in this? The idea of having to hang out with the feisty blonde made Kaminari twitch. Oh Kaminari, don't get caught up in the minutiae of it all and just enjoy life. The pinkette waved his words away. My question isn't answered by that. Well, I guess that settles it, Kirishima said, turning back to Uraraka after grinning kindly at his companions. How about you? I take it you're on Team Midoriya? Of course. She nodded enthusiastically. I'm all Deku squad. Abruptly, Aoyama appeared beside the brunette, glistening brightly, saying, and me, mademoiselle. Dude, Jesus. Even so, how do you do that? For example, is teleporting a part of your quirk? When Kaminari made a joke, he got a serious death glare in return. It's unbelievable that you would betray les trois casseters in such a manner, Kaminari. You're not at all like a silly boy. What a dull boy you are. Aoyama sighed and waved a cape that somehow materialized out of thin air. Dude, I'm saying it now even though I didn't ask to be on the Baku squad, Kaminari grimaced inwardly. Jiro looked at the electric type and said, what, les trois? It's some dumb club Aoyama made for us in Midoriya, Kaminari moaned. It's stupid, man, because we all hurt ourselves with our quirks. Aoyama held up his wrist, which was adorned with a bangle with a lightning bolt motif, and said, we made friendship bracelets. Kaminari hissed and flushed as his classmates looked at, or, in Jiro's case, laughed heartily at, the bracelet he had made for Aoyama, and they were supposed to be private. Uraraka turned to the upper bleachers after getting in his fair share of ripping on Kaminari and asked, how are you guys doing? Is there anyone else on the Deku squad? I got this far because of Midoriya, Tokiyami said, raising a hand. I will not disregard his good deed by refusing him assistance at this time. Tsuyu did the same, saying, Midoriya is pleasant, ribbit. Toru chirped, oh, I like Midoriya. Or at least I like his sister, while presumably raising her hand. To the surprise of some, Yaoyorozu also added, Midoriya has shown herself to be a good friend. I'd rather not pick sides, but... To everyone's surprise, Todoroki then raised his hand and explained, I want to beat Midoriya myself. He was baffled by his classmates' shocked expressions. Tokiyami smirked and encouraged his classmate, you won't get the chance. However, all he got in return was a slight huff. Mineta grimaced in the meantime, damn it, Midoriya. The majority of the girls support you. I promise that I will always remember this, and I'm never going to forgive you. As a tongue swung ferociously across his face, the grappist went silent. Stop talking. It's going to begin. Ribbit. All right, boys, I know you're both eager to get started, so I'll make it quick, Midnight said as she climbed onto her stage and got her whip ready. Are you two prepared? Both competitors gave a nod. Start, she said, waving her flail. As though daring the other to take the initiative, neither of them bothered to move for a brief moment. Then there was an actual explosion of sound, accompanied by a bright flash on either side. Bakugo was sprinting ahead of Izuku, green lightning arcing across his body at a breakneck pace or in time with his own heartbeat. Bakugo and his opponent both skidded to a stop, and they roared back at one another, the former pointing his already glowing right palm while the latter cocked his fist back. Midoriya was saved from a ring out only by his frantic clawing, but it was the explosive teen's move as the blast sent him flying back to the other end of the stage. This is happening. This is really happening. Let's think. I'm about as fast as him with full cowl, and I can keep track of his movements with the Sharingan. No problem. Just like any other fight. Izuku gasped and straightened himself, shaking his body and mind free of the jitters that lingered from that last blast. Deku is fast. Not as fast as me at full speed, but those eyes of his are a real problem, so it was a good time to use that move. Bakugo got onto the balls of his foot and allowed his palms to crackle a little bit to get rid of the extra perspiration that was accumulating from his sheer anticipation. Bakugo sneered and rushed forward again. Izuku immediately started to sidestep as the Sharingan came to life, his gaze fixed on Bakugo's approaching figure in his extended hands. If I can avoid this explosion, I can surprise him, Izuku said. Pulling his fist back again, Izuku waited, time moving in slow motion because of his ocular quirk, then pushed himself to the side and then straight forward, circling his opponent in 2 quick bursts of speed. We're so close to the edge, I might even get a ring out on him, too. That's the ideal angle to hit him when he turns and notices me. As per Izuku's plan, Bakugo turned his head slightly to get a good look at his opponent, but instead he was struck in the jaw with a fist. As Bakugo gasped in pain, a small but respectable amount of blood flew from his jaw. But beneath Izuku's fist, his jaw changed into a savage grin, and then the whole battlefield glowed, and the air was filled with a shrill ring. What was that? How did Kachan do that? Izuku closed his eyes and gripped his ears, both senses screaming in agony. Haha, for years, my body has been coping with the fallout from my explosions. To knock me down, it will take more than a weak punch. Izuku roared as he went flying back, feeling his shoulder dislocate and his forearm sear. and Bakugo gripped his opponent's right forearm and shoulder, delivering some of his most potent explosions with a second, more sonorous boom. Tears threatened to well up in his aching eyes, and he vaguely noticed his erratic breathing getting worse by the second as he landed painfully, unable to open his eyes, barely able to hear, and completely floored by the pain in his arm. Deku, do you feel that way? That stun grenade move was made just for you. I only needed to limit the power and make the explosions as large as possible, and voila! It was the ideal counter to that foolish quirk. Given that real flashbangs can cause blindness for up to 10 seconds, Deku must be out for a while because of those extremely sensitive eyes. The pain, the oxygen deprivation, or some grim combination of the two caused Izuku's head to become fuzzy. Damn it, breathe, don't go into shock. Young Bakugo wasn't kidding. That two-move combo was almost perfectly executed to target young Midoriya's weaknesses. But he can't go down from that. He's worked too hard for this. All Might clutched his hair anxiously, his heart thumping at the sight of his pupil's collapsed form. Rise. Damn it, hurry up, All Might whispered to himself. Inko was clutching her daughter in the stands below, hardly able to bear to see her son in pain, and Eri squirmed uneasily as the Jumbotron showed a close-up of Izuku's anguished face. Looking at the severely injured and panting student on the ground, Midnight said, Midoriya, are you still able to continue? Absolutely. Just say it, grit your teeth and speak. Thank you. Go ahead and give me some trouble, Deku. What? Is it true that you can't do anything without your capture tape? Stop breathing so quickly, get up, and keep going, it doesn't hurt that much. Tisk. So much for making that power your own. The borrowed power, he recalled the power of All Might. Izuku lost consciousness due to shock. Get up, Izuku. Izuku's bleary eyes opened in the dark, but he saw nothing. Only 8 dark figures, their faces obscured except for their sharp eyes, stood side by side. Izuku remarked on the figure's frail form and shaggy hair, saying, the one farthest to the left looks familiar. But the one on the far right, extending a shadowy hand toward Izuku, was the one who spoke for the figures. Go for it, Izuku. The will of all of us is in you. I made a promise to Kachan and All Might. Remember, Izuku. You are not alone. The Sharingan flared across Izuku's irises as he gasped and stumbled to his feet, full cowl bursting back to life. I'm okay. I can go on. How long was I out? What was that? She nodded at him to continue the fight, but whispered into her earpiece, Cementos, let's get ready to stop the fight, just in case. Midnight gave the teenager a suspicious look, as if he had gone into shock but was now eager to leave. Bakugo gazed at his recently revived opponent, Deku, who appeared on the verge of fainting before suddenly shooting up. Damn. He grinned broadly and exclaimed, now this is interesting. Bakugo paused as a flash of neon green moved through Izuku's red eyes. Izuku was, regrettably, as serious as he could be right now. Detroit Smash. Without pausing for a second, he charged forward and delivered a powerful left jab that sent Bakugo reeling. Having learned from his previous error, Izuku promptly withdrew and maintained a safe distance while closely observing his opponent. He's trying to wear me down, huh? It's time to give him what he wants. The blonde winced a little and wiped some blood from his mouth. Damn nerd punched the same spot. In an instant, Bakugo erupted and grabbed Izuku's shirt, saying, here's that throw you like to use. With all of his strength, he dragged the greenette over his shoulder, ready to throw him to the ground as soon as he was off the ground. Then a hand firmly grasped the nape of his neck. Izuku's eyes were moving more quickly than ever before, as if everything were even slower than before, and I could see more than 1 or 2 moves ahead. What's going on? Damn it, forget that for the moment, it's time to use my training. He quickly arched his back and bent his legs down so that he would land on his feet after grabbing Bakugo's neck with his good hand. Then, he pulled on Bakugo with all of his strength while crunching his abdominals so that his knees could wrap around his neck. I'm not alone. Ashido gave me the flexibility I needed to accomplish this, and Ojiro taught me how to beat that throw. Right shoulder dislocated. But is that the... Izuku shouted as he slammed his legs, and Bakugo's head with them, into the ground, then got back up and leapt away to assess the situation. He had always been able to use his Sharingan to vaguely identify some of the muscles beneath the surface of his skin, but now the muscle looked a little clearer, and underneath that he could see the faint outline of bone. I see my bones. How? What the hell happened? Focus. He gave himself a mental slap and then used his other arm to pull his right arm over the back of his head. All right, I see my arm aligning with the socket. A little tug and He felt a sharp pop and a burst of excruciating pain as he pulled his right arm toward his left shoulder, but it passed quickly, and he could see and feel that his arm was back. Yes, I adore my quirk. No punches for me, but there are other ways to win. Please, Krav Maga videos, don't let me down now. His forearm was badly burned and stung with the familiar ache of a fracture. With his head buzzing from the impact, Bakugo was just now rising to his feet. Deku. He was obviously furious. Awesome grenade. He let out another big flashbang and roared. Not wanting to risk opening his eyes just yet, Izuku jumped forward, blindly. But he cupped his ears and kept his eyes closed, cheering, "I saw that coming a mile away." Ha! Dumbass. Bakugo remained silent to prevent his position from being revealed, but he congratulated himself when Deku launched an attack while keeping his eyelids tightly closed. Bakugo moved to the side and prepared an explosion just as his opponent touched down. Izuku suddenly leapt to the side, right in front of Bakugo, and gave the ferocious teenager a forceful elbow to the ribs. What the fuck? Bakugo let out a gasp as the wind left his body. Izuku smiled triumphantly and opened his eyes, saying, "You probably didn't notice because you're used to it, but nitroglycerin smells like sugar." After a fierce battle, Izuku retaliated by dislocating Bakugo's exposed right underarm with an uppercut, saying, "You smell like caramel." With wide eyes, Kaminari exclaimed, "Dude, I love everything that's happening right now." Bakugo snarled in agony as his arm pressed against some nerves, but he chose to ignore the pain and send out a powerful blast that forced Deku back and scorched much of the field around and below him. Oh no. Despite the dislocation, Izuku can still fire explosions off. I know he has some blowback, but that last blast wasn't even big and it definitely hurt. He's shaking, at least a little. Izuku coughed and hacked from the acrid smoke, but he could hardly contain his excitement at seeing his lifelong tormentor finally on the ropes. If I keep using my right elbow, I won't be at much of a handicap at all from the burns. With an angry grin on his face, he charged forward, saying, "I need to seriously harm his arms if I want to stop his explosions." Remembering the time Ojiro had spent hammering Wing Chun into him, Izuku pressed in close and viciously pounded his feeble opponent, keeping Bakugo's arms out of the way with his elbows and shoulders to avoid any direct explosions. Bakugo roared and headbutted his opponent, sending him reeling after a particularly devastating barrage of blows to his elbows and biceps. Damn you, Deku. He had never been beaten this severely, his jaw was hurting, his arms were killing him, and now his brain was banging against his forehead. But Katsuki was enjoying himself. Damn it. You deserve it, but I can't believe, quirkless Deku, of all people is going to force me to do this. With a ferocious snarl, Bakugo pushed through the pain and fully extended both arms at his still floored opponent, now die. Bakugo roared as the blowback from his attack tore his muscles apart, but he kept his footing and went through with it. He fired the biggest explosions he had ever had from both arms, their combined strength surpassing even the one he used against Uraraka in the previous round. For a few seconds, the only sounds were the fading boom, the sound of debris falling back to earth, and, much to Bakugo's dismay, the smell of caramel. The smoke lingered for a while, shrouding the field in an ashy fog. Even then, I was down for a while, but that's the worst of it. Then Izuku exploded from the side, surrounded by the glow of his quirk. I would have been toast if I hadn't moved when I did. Kachan, it will take more than that to win me over. As he ran frantically in the direction of his lifelong rival, he let out a triumphant cry. Gah! Overdid it that time. Damn it, move. Bakugo settled for a kick, which Deku quickly avoided while kicking out the former's other leg. The latter attempted to raise his arms but felt them scream in protest. Fluid combos that link together like a dance are the best attacks when you catch your opponent off guard, according to Hagakure, and I truly know how to dance, thanks to Ishido. Despite Bakugo's insane toughness, Izuku spun swiftly, grabbed a piece of cement from the ground, and slammed it into his head, breaking skin. Deku coughed up some blood and struggled to stand up, his vision blurring from the repeated head trauma, as Katsuki howled and fired a series of weak but quick explosions from his palm that forced his opponent back again, one particularly nasty one catching him on the back. Izuku was panting heavily, his lungs screaming from the repeated inhalations of smoke, his eyes sore from the Sharingan's encroaching limit, his entire body burned and ached, and I hit his head repeatedly, nearly crippling his arms, and he's still not down. Izuku coughed and stared at his opponent with one eye closed as blood began to leak over the organ from where he had been headbutted earlier. Keikachan. Izuku said, "This is why I admired you so much. You were the only one who aspired to be a hero. No one put in as much effort as you did. If that's the case, why are you even here? Sneered Bakugo. Izuku's fists clenched as full cowl rushed all around him. Because, I want it even more than you do. First, I'm going to make you recognize me as a hero, he said, staring at his opponent with a look that would make lesser men flee in terror. Then I will outdo you. After initially stumbling, he overcame his fatigue and launched himself into a full sprint. Bakugo steeled his resolve as he glanced at his rival. No, opponent. You mean he wants to outdo me? Give me a break. As he opened his palms downward and fired, he roared and shot skyward. I'm only just starting. Bakugo spun faster and faster until he was encircled by a raging, swirling column of wind after firing a carefully timed series of explosions from either hand. This is it. He's pushing past his limitations and his injuries. To take me down, he's really going all out. No, this is going beyond even what he's capable of. Izuku's mouth would have dropped if it weren't for a smile. With Deku just getting fired up, Bakugo wouldn't stop now, even though his arms felt like they were about to fall off. Hautizer, Bakugo pointed his hand at his opponent and fired another powerful blast, impact. The burns vanished under the rage and crackle of green lightning as Izuku leapt to confront his opponent and thrust his right hand forward, saying, Chidori. The blast wave swept across the stadium, sending Midnight flying off her stage and racing past the fans in a violent torrent of power as the two attacks collided in an ear-splitting boom and the shrieking cry of 1,000 soaring eagles. To the dismay of the onlookers, it took a long time for the smoke and dust to subside, but when they did, both figures were plainly visible, one atop the other. Deku would have been impressed by the effective hold if he hadn't been so worn out. Katsuki panted heavily as he pinned Izuku down, one foot stepping on his left arm, one shin holding down both legs, one hand maintaining pressure on the right arm, and the other hand firmly pressing to his face. To catch their breath, neither of them spoke for a while before the blonde choked out a final sentence, I win. Subsequently, Katsuki tipped over and fell limp, unconscious. Izuku was startled, but he got up slowly, squirming as his right arm moved, and he turned to face the quiet crowd, the grizzled Midnight, his sister and mother, the hazy silhouette of his mentor, and the vibrant group of his friends. At last, he lifted his left arm above his head and smiled, the sixth tomo retreating into his pupils under a film of glistening tears, his Sharingan vanishing. At last, as Midnight declared for everyone to hear, the audience burst into cheers and thunderous applause. At last, the winner is Izuku Midoriya. It took a while for Cementos to get the field ready for use again after Bakugo and Midoriya destroyed it, but now that it was, Todoroki walked down the hall to the field. He still couldn't shake the memory of the previous battle, which was spectacular in every way, akin to something you'd see in a superhero or sci-fi film, but it wasn't the fight itself that caught his attention, but rather the pose Midoriya adopted to celebrate his victory, with one arm triumphantly raised over his fallen opponent. He made me think of Shoto. Instinctively, Todoroki's fists clenched and his eyes narrowed. You didn't even need to feel the intense heat that accompanied him to know who his visitor was. Ironically, it was revealed by the ice in his voice. What would you like? Look, this rebellious phase of yours has lasted long enough, Endeavor sighed. Now is the moment to mature and begin utilizing your flames. No, Todoroki spat, turning just enough to give his father his best death glare. I'll never use my left side in battle. Sighing, the number 2 hero said, Fumikage Tokiyami. How about him? Teenagers with heterochromia narrowed their eyes. You see his weakness, don't you? Already anticipating where the conversation would go, Todoroki turned away once more and said, what about it? You could end the fight in a matter of seconds with your quirk. You decide to use only half of your strength instead. It would be egregiously careless to not use your full power if this were a real fight against a villain. Stop talking. You, of all people, do not get to lecture me about heroism, screamed Todoroki, his fists trembling. You will be nothing to me after I defeat Tokiyami and then Midoriya. I will surpass you as a hero, and all it will take is mom's strength. The flame hero's face briefly flashed with anger before vanishing in smugness. Really think it'll be that simple? That boy is as powerful as All Might. It will be your loss if you genuinely believe that you can match that by restricting yourself. I assumed that my loss was also yours. After all, I'm just your tool, Todoroki said icily as he marched on toward the grass and the reconstructed battlefield. Endeavor snarled behind him, then sighed in resigned exasperation and made his way back to the observation deck. Todoroki nodded his approval to Midnight as he stepped onto the concrete, and Tokiyami immediately launched Dark Shadow forward in a swift straight attack. Todoroki sidestepped it with ease, slammed his right foot into the floor, and squinted at his opponent, saying, "I'm sorry, but I need to release some tension." As the stadium crowd started to cheer, presumably for the other semifinal match, Recovery Girl snarled. Exactly what she needed, another kid hurt. "What were you contemplating?" She barked at the two teens. No, children. In front of her. Pointing a cane at the recently reawakened Bakugo, she hissed, "You have a grade 3 concussion. Most likely some brain damage, but given what you chose to do to your arms, that might already be a condition." Izuku snickered, which was a mistake, and Bakugo averted his gaze and sighed, but muttered something that sounded vaguely like an apology. "And you?" Recovery Girl growled, "Your arm, which is already crooked and damaged, is broken once more, and for some reason, that stupid attack you seem to like depending on has burned or torn off all of the skin on it. I won't even begin to discuss the condition of your back or lungs. Do you know what careful means, or should I send you back to elementary school? Depending on your assessment, you too may be appropriate there." Izuku gulped and then lay back in his bed, his eyelids already falling as his body finally received some much-needed rest. Bakugo was doing the same thing in his own bed, blinking rapidly in a futile attempt to stay awake. Sorry. They're both really tired, huh? Sighed Recovery Girl. Well, no more reprimanding, it's time to play doctor. After wheeling Katsuki, who was now unconscious and sleeping, into a different room and securing it with curtains, she was about to do the same for Izuku when the door suddenly opened and she exclaimed, "Young Midoriya." Slender All Might hurried to his protege's bedside and frantically asked the irate doctor, "How is he? Has he suffered another permanent injury? How may I be of assistance? Does he have to eat? I'll do it if you tell me where to go." "Calm down, would you?" said Recovery Girl, slamming her cane into the symbol of peace's head. "God forbid, this is a hospital room. Additionally, Bakugo is dozing off in the rear," she growled. "I apologize, but how is he doing?" She smiled a little. Recovery Girl shuddered at the thought of the retired pro-hero and his militaristic methods. "He's nothing like Sorihiko, but it's nice to see him so concerned about his student. To be honest, he's not very good. I can't use my quirk on him because he's too tired, and even if I could, there would be a lot of damage that might not even fully heal. What can we do to prepare him for the final match?" All Might sighed into his hands. When the cane struck his skull once more, there was a loud smack. "You hear that he's got permanent damage and all you can think about is the next round? In the first place, he is pushing himself this hard because of you. He's acting in this way to meet your standards." Even for his thin build, All Might's voice was surprisingly quiet and serious. "No, you're wrong. Maybe he was pushing himself on my behalf for the other rounds, but this fight was his and his alone. To his credit, he didn't really hurt himself during this altercation. He is undoubtedly improving. Nevertheless, it doesn't alter the reality that he sustains injuries too frequently for comfort," the doctor said with a sigh and sat down in frustration. "Who's to say he won't get hurt even more if I manage to get him well enough to compete in the next round?" "He won't." All Might smiled assuredly at his student. "That boy has put in a lot of effort to reach the point where he can win his fights without depending on 100%. I know he's trying his hardest to win and win the right way, even though he may get a few bumps along the way." After shaking her head, she gave in and said, "All right. I'll believe you this time if you're that certain. However, this must not occur again." With a menacing cane in hand, Recovery Girl issued a warning. With a sheepish laugh, he held out his hands and said, "Got it." The stadium trembled as a whole. What was that? Was the match there? Then All Might ran from the room. At last, some quiet time. With a quick glance back, the blonde said, "Oh, by the way, Midoriya's family and friends are probably headed this way." Recovery Girl shuddered in anticipation. "Oh no," she said. Bakugo, half awake, was trying to make sense of what he had just heard behind the curtains in the back. Deku was fighting for someone else. Who was that guy? He sounded familiar. When his student summoned a gigantic glacier to immobilize Tokiyami, Aizawa's eyes popped out of his skull. "I knew Tokiyami was powerful, but this is funny." Even Principal Nezu's normally detached manner briefly shifted to one of complete surprise before reverting to the well-known, if annoying, facade of sly confidence. Below, with much of her body covered in frost from the overwhelming force of the attack, Midnight chattered through her teeth, "TT Todoroki wins." He cleared his throat and said into the microphone, "We're going to take a short break to clear the field and then we'll continue with the finals. Maybe don't wear a micron-thick bodysuit to a high school event, next time. Her costume is definitely not helping with the temperature." I'm going to go check on Midoriya and Bakugo. Still haven't gotten any word if he's good to go for the next round, Aizawa said as he got up and left the announcer's box. Nezu nodded knowingly. You're allowed to be worried about your students, you know? I wrote about it in one of my books. Teaching for total do. Before the principal could finish, Aizawa slammed the door and headed for the hospital wing. What are you doing? He asked, passing an All Might who appeared suspicious as he peered at the battlefield. With a start, he turned around and gripped his chest, saying, Geez, Eraser. You scared me half to death. He pointed to his heavily bandaged head and arms and said, I'm pretty sure I'm closer to death between the two of us. Hey. Considering who you're talking to, that'd be an accomplishment. That doesn't answer my question. I thought you'd be fawning over Midoriya or something. All Might covered his mouth with his hand and scolded himself in his head, saying, what? I just wanted to see what the commotion was before heading back. Gah. The hero who had been mummified simply shook his head. Easy. Look, I don't really care about your guy's weird bond, but is he gonna be able to fight in the next round or not? Well. Hopefully. The symbol of peace's apprehensive hand gestures and sheepish expression were not encouraging. Aizawa groaned in frustration as he passed his colleague and headed toward the medical wing, where he could already hear a loud disturbance. Upon opening the door, a difficult task given his lack of upper limbs, he immediately felt remorse for his life decisions. Inko Midoriya cried out, My babyyyyyy, while clutching her son so firmly that it was likely shattering some new bones. Through his mother's tears, Midoriya muttered feebly, Mom, please let me go, it hurts. Uraraka and Kirishima were at the side of his bed, doing everything they could to persuade the elder Midoriya to let her son go. Yaoyorozu was playing with Eri in the corner, or trying to, considering how often the little girl tried to scuttle into the arms of her guardian. This was an error. Aizawa cleared his throat and said, Ahem. This caught everyone's attention and caused them to stop what they were doing, with the exception of Eri, who took advantage of the brief pause to rush to Midoriya and get into his bed. Uraraka exclaimed, Aizawa-sensei, and Yaoyorozu instantly stood up. Just need to know if Midoriya can continue or not, he said, waving them away before making his way to Recovery Girl. I don't recom, Izuku said. Yes, I'm good to go, with a look of panic on his face at the prospect of leaving early. The boy was examined by his teacher. His right arm was covered in enough bandages to serve as a capture weapon, and his face was a little scratched. Except for a piece of gauze wrapped around his middle, his torso was bare, with the frayed remnants of his shirt resting on the floor next to his shoes. Additionally, his eyes continued to flutter as if he might suddenly fall asleep in between coughing and adjusting his arm, most likely for some measure of comfort. He looked like shit all around. Aizawa said, I doubt that very much. What do you think? He asked, turning to face the matriarch. With mixed feelings on her face, Inko turned away and bit her lip. I don't like this, Izuku. I don't want you to keep getting hurt, she said. Yes. Finally, some people with sense. He's too tired for me to heal, so if he wanted to fight, he'd be going in exhausted and with half of his body broken. The recovery girl practically burst out laughing. Looking directly into his student's eyes, Aizawa continued, You'd be against Todoroki, you know. As he said that, he noticed a shift in Midoriya's eye expression. It makes sense. Your chances of getting in front of the pros would be more ruined by a poor performance than by a strong one. And in order to defeat Todoroki, he would have to be at the top of his game. Midoriya's eyes were steely as he said matter-of-factly, I'm ready. This was a bad idea. Really, Aizawa was aware of it. However, it was impossible to ignore the fire in the boy's eyes. Oh. I suppose that's why All Might finds the child so endearing. He stopped at the door and turned slightly before saying, And Midoriya. You have 15 minutes to get to the field. Why yeah? He left the hospital room without saying anything more, hardly even acknowledging All Might as he pressed his ear against the exterior wall. Good stuff out there. Returning to the announcer's booth, he almost passed out when he saw who was there to welcome him. No, not you. Izuku was about to sit up after grinning when he felt a firm hand squeeze him. Mom? At her son, Inko sadly shook her head and said, I'm sorry, Izuku, but I don't feel comfortable with this. But Mom, Aizawa-sensei said it was fine. She pointed to his fractured body and said, No, he said you had 15 minutes to get ready. How do you expect to be healed enough to fight by then? But I have to fight Todoroki. Dude, I know you want to win and all, but this is your health we're talking about, Kirishima interrupted. Really, Midoriya? You're a finalist already. The sports festival isn't worth doing more permanent damage to your body, especially in your first year. You guys. It's not that simple. Izuku groaned and looked down. Todoroki. I can't tell you guys everything, but he needs this. And if I don't go out there, I don't want to take that chance. There was a stunned silence in the room as everyone thought about what Izuku had just explained. All Might took a sharp breath outside, only dimly conscious of the troubles facing the Todoroki household. Startled by her friend's intentions, Uraraka squeaked out, "You're trying to help Todoroki? By kicking his ass?" Kirishima asked, ignoring Yaoyorozu's elbow directed at him. Izuku sighed. "I don't know what I'm gonna do, to be honest, but I need to set some stuff straight with him, and if fighting him is what it takes, then I'll do it." "Be that as it may, your body's in no condition for that. You won't even have the chance to open your mouth if you try to go out there," Recovery Girl said, pinching the bridge of her nose and shaking her head. Eri gave her brother a questioning glance. Even though he appeared to be in pain, it was evident from his determined expression that he still wanted to assist the other boy. "I'll protect you if you're scared. I promise, it's all gonna be okay now, because I am here. If I can control it, then I could save a lot more people, right?" She watched Izuku train and practice his quirk for weeks, pushing himself to the brink of exhaustion, and he had control over it now. However, why was he unable to save this individual? It's not his fault, but he's hurt. All he wants to do is assist others. She put her arms around her brother without saying anything. "Deku ni." What's up?" he asked, glancing down at her. Eri opened her mouth to speak, but her words fell flat. Instead, she hoped for the best while burying her head in his side. "I could save the only person who matters if I can control it." Aizawa sighed and looked at his watch. "It's time. He's not on the field. Apologies, Midoriya, but..." "Wow, Eraser. The other guy's late, huh?" To his new co-commentator, Aizawa groaned and said, "You don't have to keep saying that every 5 seconds. You can be silent, too." "Geez," said Ms. Joke with a chuckle, "no need to be so harsh, Eraserhead. We're dating after all." "We definitely are not. Well, Nezu asked me to sub for him, so..." Had his hands not been in a cast, he would have buried his face in them and said, "You don't even work for the school. This is borderline treasonous." "PFT. You're so funny. Maybe I should get Present Mike to come back to listen to your jokes." "Let's just get on with it. So, what do we do if the kid's a no-show?" she asked, nodding before scratching her head. "Ahem. Aizawa cleared his throat and switched on his microphone. Ms. Joke yelled into his microphone, "Whoa, he's here," dismissing Eraserhead in the process. As promised, Izuku Midoriya was making her way onto the concrete stage wearing a brand new gym shirt and appeared to be in good health overall. He actually had a nearly flawless appearance. The eyes of Aizawa narrowed. There are no bandages visible. He is moving his body normally. How did he recover so quickly? Izuku and Todoroki met eyes on the ground, and Izuku nodded. In response, the dual quirk user prepared his left foot and rolled his shoulders. "Ooh, I just can't wait to see what delicious image you leave me with this time." Midnight grinned at the newest arrival and let out a loud cry. "If both challengers are ready, then let the final match of the UA Sports Festival's first-year stage begin." She cracked her whip. Todoroki wasted no time in attacking, quickly summoning a wave of ice to strike his adversary. However, it was somewhat lackluster in comparison to the glacier he called forth against Tokiyami. However, his opponent's reaction was anything but. In a burst of green, Izuku swung around the explosion and struck Todoroki's chin with a forceful uppercut, bringing the heterochromic team to the ground. Izuku then moved to where his opponent was lying and used both hands to grab his right arm. In a sudden panic, Todoroki used his whole right side to create a shell of ice around himself, forcing Midoriya to retreat or risk being encased. Todoroki, shivering ever so slightly from the brief overexertion, rubbed the spot where Midoriya had hit him. He's acting hostilely. Clever plan. Making it difficult for someone with overwhelming power to use it at all is the best way to defeat them. However, he has never been this combative right away. Todoroki's hardened gaze met the greenettes as he carefully eyed her. What's that expression in his eyes? 15 minutes prior, Eri's horn began to glow and spark, and Izuku gasped. The noise sounded jumbled to him, but he could hear the others, his mother and Recovery Girl, yelling in shock and surprise. Then his body felt hot all of a sudden. In fact, unbearably so. Like the melting of his own skeleton. Then he seemed to be growing an iceberg out of his chest, and it was cold. His senses were overwhelmed by a flash of light, and his body went numb. It was gone in a blank instant, as abruptly as it had all occurred. Izuku stammered, what? As Eri withdrew, her face wet. Another short burst of heat rushed through him as he moved his arm and hissed. Inko worried about her son, asking, Izuku, are you okay? What just happened? Kirishima asked his friends, to which the two girls gave him puzzled looks and shrugged. Well, whatever that was. Eri's horn dislodged some of your dressing. The recovery girl held back her initial curiosity in order to deal with a problem that she could truly comprehend. With great effort, she pushed Inko away and proceeded to her patient's bedside, where she began readying the gauze. Then her eyes almost shot out of their sockets, and she stopped with a start. 5 minutes ago, the skin was pocked with cuts, bruises, and burns, but now it was healed. It complemented the rest of his body flawlessly and wasn't even faintly pink like fresh skin usually was. As though the wound had never existed at all. With a surge of adrenaline and a tinge of excitement coursing through her, Recovery Girl pushed Izuku forward, maybe too hard, and checked his back, which had sustained the most damage. His skin was restored again. Recovery Girl's mouth dropped when she saw the flawlessly aligned bone structure and the gleam of clean skin after he tore off the bandages from his right arm. That isn't feasible. This must not be feasible. The epidermis had almost completely disappeared. That's at least a full day of recuperation, even with my quirk. With each look at his healed limbs, Izuku's eyes widened and he asked, Our recovery girl? With a gulp, the doctor started taking off the bandages, saying, well. It looks like you're fully healed. The silence in the room was tangible. Flexing his arm, Izuku marveled at how normal it felt and how profoundly discombobulating it was to somehow avoid the healing process. It was nearly like losing the ability to taste the difference between hunger and fullness. He raked his fingers over his back and torso, searching for the smallest flaw or seam between layers of skin. There was no sign of the severe burns he had received at the hands of his rival. Not even a scar. Not only was he healed, the harm had all but been repaired. Eri, was this your quirk? Izuku asked, turning to face Eri, who was now pressing her face against his side. She looked away and blinked away the tears, but she nodded. She claimed that people are harmed by her quirk, but this is the complete opposite. If she is able to repair bodily harm, that could be a more significant paradigm shift than All Might. I just wanted to help you, she said, whimpering a little as she glanced up at her brother and savior. Please, don't be mad. After giving the girl a tearful look, Izuku melted and embraced her tightly, saying, Thank you. Really, Eri, this means so much to me. You mean so much to me. I'd never be mad at you. She cried a little, but she also put her arms around him. Izuku then noticed a minor detail. Eri, you're really warm. Izuku withdrew and examined the young child from head to toe, her eyes widening at her flushed features and red cheeks. That's a fever right there. How about we get you some medicine and bed rest, huh? Said Recovery Girl, pointing an IR thermometer at the young girl and whistling at the reading. The little girl shook her head and wiped the last of the tears from her eyes. To be honest, she could definitely use a good lie down and felt a little tired from voluntarily using her quirk. Eri took the older woman's hand and allowed her brother to lower her off the bed. She then allowed herself to be led to the bed next to it, where she immediately fell asleep and began to snore softly but in a way that was still sonorous. Izuku grinned at the scene until his arm was suddenly pinched, and he exclaimed, Ow. Sorry, just checking that it was really healed, Kirishima said, sheepishly rubbing his head. There are undoubtedly more effective ways to accomplish that. Izuku drenched in sweat and got to his feet. Inko walked over to her son and said, Hey, what are you doing? Izuku began to unwrap the new Ua shirt on his bedside table and said, I'm all better now and I only have a few minutes to get to the field. As Izuku dressed, Uraraka looked up at the ceiling and said, You sure that's a good idea? Maybe you should wait for Recovery Girl to examine you. Furthermore, Yaoyorozu looked up with slightly flushed cheeks and said, Seriously, we don't know what happened to you. It's not good to rush into things. And have some decency. Have you seen your hero costume? Yaoyorozu protested wryly. Kirishima. That's completely different? Izuku exclaimed, I feel fine, really, heck, I feel great, I mean, my chest tingles a little bit, but that's no biggie, before stretching his body out and startling it awake after the prolonged rest in the hospital bed. Wait to be cleared. What just happened is completely out of my wheelhouse, so for all I know, you could explode, said Recovery Girl, jabbing him with her cane. The idea of spontaneous combustion made him yell, but Izuku chased it away with the words, I don't think Eri would do that to me. Yeah, she really loves Deku. And that hug at the end was so sweet. Uraraka nodded in agreement, her perma blush flaming as she recalled the affectionate moment between siblings. Yeah, that was so freaking sweet, dude. Kirishima gave a thumbs up. The eldest woman groaned and shook her head, saying, it doesn't matter how admittedly sweet it was. It's an unknown and that means I need to conduct tests. Izuku practically pleaded, recovery girl, please let me go. I don't have any problems. She made an effort to be tough, but that beseeching gaze was painfully reminiscent of the times when a certain foolish but brave blonde would relentlessly and repeatedly push himself to the limit of his endurance in his passionate quest to become a social icon. I will regret doing this. You said you had some chest discomfort? Just a weird feeling right here. Kinda like pins and needles. Well, if it's not causing you pain, then I guess you can go participa. Before recovery girl could finish her sentence, Izuku hurried out of the clinic, leaving a hurried, thank you, as he dashed to the field, trailing behind. Now Todoroki summoned another wave of ice, faster but smaller. The crackling ice rushed over his head and rolled down like an avalanche, hurtling toward the greenette. Izuku responded by leaping over the ice and beginning to jump from peak to peak as if the rocky terrain were a set of loose stepping stones. I can now locate footholds by following the ice's flaws. Izuku then leapt much harder than he had anticipated, soaring over his opponent and his next foothold just as he was about to attack the stunned Todoroki again. As soon as he hit the ground, Izuku quickly adjusted and poked Todoroki, looking the other teenager in the cheek. What was that? I hit my target completely out of range. Izuku prepared to attack Todoroki again while mentally scolding himself, but the smaller teen was thrown back to his side of the field by Todoroki, who grabbed his shirt and threw him over his shoulder while simultaneously ejecting ice from his right hand. Todoroki quickly established a breathing pattern, flexing his abdominal muscles during the exhale to empty his lungs completely and then relaxing them during the inhale. In this manner, he experienced a significant warming of his torso, which progressively extended to his right arm. I was able to make some progress back there. He appears to be attempting to sidestep my blows before using speed and surprise to deliver a devastating blow that takes me by surprise. That's a game that two can play. Todoroki sent another flurry of ice at his opponent with another wave of his hand. Izuku sidestepped the assault once more and sprinted to the side, slanting his body in preparation for a furious run across the field. However, Todoroki sprang forward at that precise moment, using his right leg to summon an ice ramp that lifted him above Midoriya. As usual, the latter reacted swiftly, but as the former had intended, his visibility was significantly diminished by the fog and glistening ice. Todoroki's leg kicked Midoriya's head sideways during his opponent's moment of weakness, and then his right arm grabbed Midoriya's and froze the entire appendage in a straight bar of ice. Izuku exclaimed, "Gah!" as he flinched from the sudden, intense cold and leapt out of the mist cloud to regain his bearings. Oh no, his application, judgment, reactions, everything about him is superb. Even with full cowl, he was only able to break the ice a little when he attempted to flex his right arm out of the ramrod straight position it had frozen into. If I used the Chidori, I could probably break it, but my skin would get damage. Perhaps if I bumped it into something. A plan began to take shape, and he grinned. Izuku pulled his right arm back, feeling his center of gravity shift from the added weight of the ice and adjusting accordingly, charging forward without waiting for an attack. Todoroki summoned a wall of ice and stopped his warming exercises. But Izuku broke through the barrier with his right arm acting as a hammer, breaking most of the ice on his arm in the process. It's time to tidy up the remainder. With an audible slam, he spun quickly to gain momentum and slammed his arm directly into Todoroki's side, knocking the teenager back several meters. Todoroki clutched his right side in shock. Broke some ribs, for sure. The breathing exercises were a waste of time. He struggled to his feet before powerful hands seized his right arm again. He instinctively encased his body in an ice shell once more. Only a last-second ice wall from his leg kept Todoroki from flying towards the grass after a burst of green and an eagle's cry. He tried to assess the damage in a daze. The humerus is definitely broken. If I stay on my forearm and don't move my shoulder, I should be able to apply ice. But the ribs and this, I can't use my right side at all because of him. Todoroki startled and met his opponent's eyes. Midoriya was breathing heavily. His right arm was raw and red from the ice, and judging by the bleeding, it looked like he used the same hand for his explosive attack. But he had such a satisfied expression. As he stood up, Todoroki gritted his teeth and asked, "Why are you doing this?" "What? You're targeting my right side. You could have gone for the head and done more damage, but instead, you're trying to disable me. Why?" Running forward, Izuku said, "You know why." Even though Todoroki was cold, his blood was even colder. "What is this? What's the matter with him?" Using his right leg, he skated around the field, moving forward on a constant flow of ice. Midoriya's got a strategy. He knows Todoroki's power originates from his right side, so that's where he's focusing his efforts. Aizawa laughed. With a positively shit-eating grin, Ms. Joke replied, "Ooh, and what's your take on that, Eraserhead? You're the guest here, so why don't you take this one?" The mummified hero scowled at his fellow commentator. The audience let out an audible, "Ooh," at the line, "PSH, making a guest do the hard part. Real classy, Eraserhead. This is why I left you. We never dated." The audience gasped collectively once more as the speaker said, "I'll say, let me tell the fans something interesting. That capturing weapon around his neck is about the only thing he has that can get hard. She acts as though herpes were a person." "Back to the fight," Aizawa said, ignoring the mocking but arrogant look Ms. Joke directed at him. "It's never a good idea to aim for where the attack is coming from. If you were trying to stop a gunman, you wouldn't punch the barrel. That's borderline suicidal. So what's the aforementioned strategy then?" "No idea." That statement was untrue. Eraserhead was well aware that Todoroki's home life was troubled, and that this affected his quirk's fire element. Although Eraserhead detested seeing potential wasted, he also believed that it was crucial to treat the psyche with gentleness, particularly in teenagers. Regretfully, Aizawa lacked sufficient proof to claim that not using his left side was hurting him because Todoroki was also so skilled. "Although it appears that Midoriya is choosing tough love, I had hoped that the festival would have pushed you to change on your own." On the one hand, Aizawa was impressed, if that can even adequately convey how completely unimpressed he was, that his student was attempting to push his classmate. However, it's fucking dumb as hell. He intends to circle me, and I can see his movements. Todoroki arced his eyes to shoot directly at Izuku, who turned right. He will leap to his feet. Todoroki squatted a little, like a leopard ready to leap. And he will attempt to shoot some ice out of his hand. Before he lands and is unable to support himself, I'll avoid it, roll beneath him, and kick him from behind. Izuku jumped to the side as soon as he saw his plan and grinned. As Todoroki leapt into the air, that is. What a waste, it was much too early, what's wrong with me? A sudden blast of mist from Todoroki's hand, which was pressed tightly against Izuku's body to prevent jostling his broken arm, caught him completely off guard as he mentally chastised himself and his impetuous movements. Missed. I didn't anticipate that. Izuku pondered in vain before Todoroki kicked him and summoned another wave of ice, causing him to feel a sharp pain in his chest. Izuku was painfully thrown back by the blow, but he quickly charged the Chidori into his right hand and arced it across the ground, hopefully buying some time and sending several pieces of concrete and rock towards Todoroki. What the hell, really? If I'm too busy moving like a total idiot, I can't concentrate on forcing Todoroki to use his right side. A stray shard of ice caught his reflection as he glanced around. He saw something with his improved vision that left him speechless. There's an extra mark, my Sharingan. He registered the discovery after a moment. Perhaps it can develop from even stronger emotions if it is triggered by intense ones. That would account for my unexpected ability to locate Kachan during our altercation. However, why am I currently making such poor moves? There wasn't much time to think because Todoroki slammed his foot into the ground and came out of the dust, creating an omnidirectional wave of ice. You must move. Izuku leapt up and out of the area of effect, then some, and landed perilously near the edge of the battlefield. Whoa! 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 If he hadn't dug his nails into the ground until they bled to steady himself, he would have fallen over from the sudden movement. I believe I understand now. Even though the Sharingan changed, I'm still not accustomed to it. I'm overcompensating in my movements or reacting too quickly because I'm not used to this much information. The greenette was hit by another wave of ice as Todoroki slammed his foot into the ground. It will be very difficult for me to wear him down if I am unable to use the Sharingan. However, he's already quite exhausted. Even a Sharingan could see the thick layer of frost on Todoroki's right side and the severe chill running through his body. There was a rather ugly bruise on his chin. At this point, I would lose if I attempted to force him to use his right side without the Sharingan. However, I might succeed if I alter my plan and simply attempt to take him out with full cowl. The edge of the ice was drawing nearer. Another thing I could do, though, is to use a couple Delaware smashes to force him to use his flames. Izuku's instincts told him to jump, but he would only hurt himself if he gave in to his untrained reactionary urges. However, even if I beat Todoroki, it wouldn't be my victory if I gave it my all. But is that really the point? Izuku gave Todoroki a look. No, it certainly is. It would be foolish for me to lose after all of the work and hardship I've endured to get here. They looked at each other, lonesome. Minutes prior to the game, Izuku whooshed past the waiting room in spectacular fashion as he dashed down the hall to the battlefield. Aizawa's generosity in offering a grace period was out of character, but Izuku understood that it was likely to be a one-time offer. For the renownedly strict teacher, tardiness was definitely unacceptable, especially during the UA Sports Festival final round. Izuku skidded to a halt in awe and terror as a hulking man in a navy blue supersuit cloaked in fire rounded the corner, staring the greenette dead in the eye. This made the next event even more inconvenient for the endearing student. Endeavor? Even though he was speaking softly, the number 2 pro hero was unable to conceal the deep, resounding boom of his voice any more than he could in a pitch-black room. There you are. However, Endeavor's voice simply exuded power, and not in a positive way, in contrast to the reassuring sense of security that All Might's commanding vocals provided. He is really intimidating, Izuku muttered. Hi. The older man's presence ironically extinguished the symbolic fire in his heart. I saw your fights. That's some incredible power you got, kinda like All Might. Well, that's... I gotta get going. Panicked, Izuku hurried by. Does Todoroki's family accuse me of being All Might's illegitimate son because of some genetic trait? My son has the potential to surpass All Might. He's in a bit of a rebellious phase, but I think you might be able to knock some sense into him. So give it your best shot. Endeavor, as luck would have it, wasn't finished yet. He began to leave, each step thundering through the narrow halls. I'm not All Might. With a flaming eyebrow, Endeavor turned around and said, Huh? I mean that's obvious. And Todoroki isn't you. Anger flashed across the pro hero's eyes, briefly causing the fire surrounding his face to surge. Izuku quickly left after noticing the shift in tone, his inner fire rekindled with a vengeance. Todoroki's ice was abruptly blown back by a strong, concussive force, causing his eyes to narrow and then widen. Everyone in the stadium shivered as a blast of icy wind blew past the field and the spectators. Geez, what was that? Ms. Joke asked, her normally detached tone taking on an air of surprise. The contempt in Aizawa's voice was evident as he said, I think Midoriya changed his strategy. With a groan, Izuku withdrew his left hand, his middle finger swollen and red from the fracture. That hurts, damn it. However, it really did work. As Todoroki's shocked expression appeared, he transformed his pained expression into a wild grin. However, the latter soon sent Deku a series of ice streams, indicating that the surprise was short-lived and soon replaced by a wild frustration. Izuku blasted the multi-directional ice away with a rapid succession of flicks of his index, ring, and pinky fingers, his nerves oblivious to the pain due to a combination of pure adrenaline and a good deal of shock. My right hand is gone. He's deteriorating rapidly now. He will be forced to use his left side if he launches a few more attacks like that. He's playing with me, Midoriya. Todoroki slammed his right foot and hand into the ground so forcefully that the ground cracked slightly, his growl of rage verging on a roar. He put everything he had, or at least what was left of him, into this move, and it showed. The glacier that resulted was incredibly enormous and took up a large portion of the stadium. Izuku swore, his inner Bakugo coming out as a result of the pain and fatigue. You gotta be shitting me. He completely destroyed the ice and made sure that the tens of thousands present would be cold the following day due to the resulting winds by cocking his left arm back and punching forward with all of his strength, tearing his sleeve in the process. That's all. That includes my entire right hand and left arm. Tell me, please, that he is now prepared to use his freaking fire. He wasn't. Todoroki's right side was almost completely covered in frost, and the skin that was visible was extremely pale. He appeared to be in the most uncomfortable position possible and was trembling terribly. However, there was a decent-sized ice wall behind him, and a few meters of concrete before the edge. Goddamn! What don't you get about this? His whole body hurt, and the cold was soaking into his bones, making his broken arm hurt even more. However, Izuku also had a small village's worth of adrenaline pumping through his veins, so he ran forward without much thought, pushing past the ice and debris without pausing, and then immediately headbutted his opponent with the momentum of his entire body. With skulls heavy with lead, both fell to the ground and struggled to stand. Izuku twisted his body up into a shaky standing position, groaning as his broken bones moved uneasily. Todoroki, beside him, was trembling in a similar way, his body, worn by battle, resembling his hero costume in reverse. Todoroki sputtered, snow like frost slipping off his right side. Why? Why are you putting yourself through this? Did my father put you up to this? He asked. Izuku growled and used his legs to propel himself forward, connecting his broken hand with Todoroki's stomach with 5% of one for all. The force of the impact sent the other teen flying back and knocked off most of the frost buildup from him. He shouted, ignoring the shrieking pain in his knuckles. Everyone gave this tournament their all. Uraraka, Iida, Yaoyorozu, Kachan. It makes me really pissed that you think you can just scrape by with only half of your power. Wheezing on the ground, Todoroki pushed himself back up while covering his stomach with his icy hand to act as a cold compress. That's not what I'm doing. I'm gonna win with my power, not his. How do you still not get it? It's all yours. Your quirk, not his, Izuku yelled. It's okay to use your power to become who you want to be. My strength. Much to the surprise and amazement of the crowd, a wall of bright orange flames roared to life across the arena in a brilliant flash of light, bathing the stadium in a warm glow and an almost unbearable heat. Now who's the one who doesn't get it? This is a match, remember? You're not supposed to be helping your opponent, Todoroki said, standing tall in the middle of the fire with a manic smile on his face as the ice that had been caked on sublimated off his right side. Shoto could just make out his father's thunderous roar in the distance, but that didn't matter at the moment because, in the best tunnel vision ever, he was staring straight ahead at the man across from him, his own shaky smile plastered across his battle-weary face. Thank you, Izuku. After operating on her most recent and loyal patient, Recovery Girl sighed with a mixture of relief and frustration as she finally took a seat. All Might, in his slender frame, sat with his hands folded in the corner of the room, staring at the floor with a look of either profound shame or solemn reflection. After his student's terrible performance in the final round, Recovery Girl honestly hoped for the latter. After wasting his strong lead in the first half of the fight by using 100% of one for all to break his bones, Midoriya and his opponent engaged in a violent altercation that left the battlefield in ruins, Midoriya severely injured, and Todoroki the winner. Recovery Girl was aware that there was more to the story, of course, especially considering how intent Midoriya was on saving his classmate, as evidenced by his passionate pre-fight statements. Furthermore, she would be lying if she claimed that his perseverance during that battle did not impress her. However, the injuries he received while attempting to assist someone else were not to be laughed at, and the doctor, who had taken an oath to do no harm, felt a twinge of remorse as she allowed a student to take part in the fight that led to those injuries. All Might asked in a soft, gentle voice that was hardly audible above a whisper, "How much longer do you think he'll be? This is his third time receiving serious treatment today. He'll be out for a while," the Recovery Girl growled. "I'm sorry, I'll be sure to scold him for this," All Might said, nodding and returning to twiddling his thumbs. "Well, you can't praise him, that's for sure. I don't like this, Toshinori," she said, sighing into her hand. The blonde awoke to the strange sound of his own name and asked, This behavior he exhibits, it's too reckless. I don't like seeing students get injured this often, especially when it's to live up to somebody else." She responded directly, "This boy idolizes you so much that it's affecting his health and now it's affecting his performance. Both of those things should concern you, right?" "I know, so we're clear on what you need to do." Neither the weight of Recovery Girl's words nor the sound of a young man shifting his paper sheets in a hospital bed saying, "Young Midoriya," caused him to say nothing in response. As the sleep left his eyes and he regained consciousness, the greenette let out a deep breath. Then, as the aching of his wounds filled his body with silent agony, he let out a moan. With a gentle and relieved smile, Recovery Girl gave Izuku a small handful of colorful candies and said, "Easy, Sonny. Here, have some gummies." The match, Todoroki, is he?" He sighed comfortably as he swallowed and nodded appreciatively. "Hush now, no time for, is he alright?" Recovery Girl couldn't help but smile when she said, "He's fine now. He had some frostbite from overusing his quirk." Izuku's face relaxed a little, but not much considering the amount of pain he was likely feeling. "Good. My arms, they feel a little weird." "Well, they're still not fully healed. If I did that, you could fall into a coma." "On his right arm," Izuku said, "but it feels different than that. It's like how it felt after USJ. You sustained more permanent damage to your hand. It's just your fingers, but let this be a reminder of how dangerous your quirk is," Recovery Girl said, letting out a sigh before carefully removing some of his bandages. Flexing his untangled hand, Izuku winced at the slight pain in his fingers, which now matched his already crooked and scarred palm. Eri, at least, enjoys it. Izuku sat up startled and said, "Wait, Eri, is she okay?" "She's fine. Little bit of a fever, but that might just be from the heat. She and your mom were pretty worried though. You might be in for quite a scolding later tonight." She cracked a joke to provide some humor. "Phew, that's good to hear. Any idea how she healed me?" Recovery Girl sighed. "I have a few ideas, but so far, all I can say is that it's a healing quirk of some type. More powerful than mine if you were able to go fight right afterwards without feeling tired." The boy gritted his teeth as tears began to form at the corner of his eyes. "Oh right, the fight." Izuku's face changed subtly as his eyes closed in resignation. "I'm sorry, All Might. I couldn't live up to your expectations. I shouldn't have said anything to him. I should have just focused on winning. But he just looked so lonely. I just couldn't see around myself." Izuku's face contorted into a quiet sob as he opened his teary eyes and gazed into the fluorescent lights overhead. After a brief moment of reflection, All Might pondered quietly, "It's true that I'm disappointed in the end result, but saying that won't change anything. But you did what you did because you wanted to help him. And at the end of the day, meddling when you don't have to is the essence of being a hero." With that, he bulked up and left the room, stopping only briefly at the door. After the door creaked shut, there was a long, heavy silence that was only occasionally broken by sniffles. Midnight cleared her throat and moved in front of the pedestal of the winners. She noticed that only Tokiyami appeared content to be up there, or at least content by his standards, as she looked at the four boys standing on the cement formation. Bakugo's hands were buried so deep in his pockets that you might have thought they would explode if they came out, which is a possibility. His irritated eyes were twitching uncontrollably next to him. Midnight wouldn't rule out the possibility that Midoriya had somehow hurt his neck in a way that prevented him from moving his self-pitying eyes off the ground, but he was unable to do so because his arm was in a sling and a large portion of his body was covered in white cloth on the other end of the pedestal. How many bandages does Ua actually have left at this point? At last, Todoroki stood in the middle of the first place tier, constantly glancing at his left hand and muttering to himself something melodramatic. All things considered, they were a poor excuse for winners, and Midnight's sadistic dominatrix side was all for it. Her own desires, however, would have to wait until later. She ignored the fact that it was daylight and yelled into her microphone, "Let's get started with the awards ceremony," as fireworks burst across the stadium. In third place we have Fumikage Tokiyami and Katsuki Bakugo. In second, we have Izuku Midoriya. And in first, it's none other than Shoto Todoroki, Midnight said, gesturing with her flail toward the pedestal as the audience applauded as expected. "And to present the medals, we have, ha ha ha. I have arrived," a huge figure with an equally enormous laugh threw his shadow across the field from the top of the stadium. When the audience realized that the people's hero, the symbol of peace himself, All Might, was his trademark laugh, they nearly went into a frenzy. With the medals, present Mike's snicker from the background, "Ha, amateurs," finally broke the awkward silence. All Might collected himself and approached Tokiyami, saying, "Young Tokiyami, congratulations on your performance. Just be aware of and work to overcome your shortcomings and I know you'll reach new heights." This was while the security detail was frantically trying to figure out how the pro hero had sneaked back in. Before moving on to the next hero, the pro put a bronze medal around the boy's neck, gave him a quick embrace, and bowed, saying, "Thank you All Might. Young Bakugo, very well done. You demonstrated a lot of growth from when you started, but don't forget to." Bakugo scoffing and glaring to the side, he growled, "I got it. Just move on to Deku." All Might, sweating, tried to put the medal around his student's neck, but the student shook his head, "No. Forget it, I don't want anything for third place. Please just take the damn medal." "Hey," All Might chuckled uneasily. Why not then take the medal as a sign of your shortcomings today and a reminder to do better next time?" With obvious disdain on his face, the ashy blonde grudgingly obeyed, snatching the medal out of the hero's hand and keeping it by his side. Proceeding. Then, seeing the boy's troubled expression, All Might turned to his pupil and experienced a slight twinge of guilt. Taking a deep breath, All Might held out the silver medal and said, "You know I can't praise you for your performance in the finals." His hero continued, "Nevertheless, you managed to both even the score with a rival and help a friend in need. Those are things I can, and will, congratulate you on." Izuku's already dejected expression fell even lower. All Might whispered, "Remember, young Izuku. I'm proud of you." He drew back and, after a brief pause, gently ruffled the boy's hair as he approached to put the medal around his protégé's neck. Then he turned to face Todoroki in the center, but the second-place finisher, with the biggest, most stupid smile on his face, heard nothing he had to say. After Aizawa threw them out of the festival, Kaminari moaned and stretched his arms over his head, saying, "Man, that was a freaking day." With the exception of Todoroki, who was present but quiet, Iida, who left early for something serious based on the expressions of Uraraka and Midoriya, who left with his family, and Bakugo, who simply wanted to leave. Class 1A was currently leaving the UA premises in the late afternoon sun, carrying light conversation among the various groups. "Tell me about it. I haven't felt this tired since, probably ever," Jiro said, nodding her head in agreement. With his cheeks flushed from the humiliation of being duped by the dealer, Kaminari shot back, "You sure that's not just 'cause you're weighed down by all of our cash?" Jiro extracted a huge bundle of bills and held them out to her classmates, saying, "Oh, that reminds me. I'm not actually gonna take your guys' money like that, you know." With a smile that was nothing short of tooth rotting, Yaoyorozu covered her heart and said, "Jiro, you're such a good person." As their vice representative's overwhelming buoyancy revitalized their weary bodies, the class as a whole thought, pure. Whistling, Kaminari accepted his portion of the money and said, "But damn, imagine what we could have done with all this money." I have an idea of how we could spend that money," said Mineta, who seemed to appear at the exact moment, his eyes sparkling and his lips twitching. With her jacks at the ready to stab him, Jiro said, "No." But Yaoyorozu interrupted him, drawing back her sleeve to make a weapon if necessary, and said, "No." But, for good measure, Tsuyu slapped him across the face with her tongue and added, "No." Mineta hurriedly said, "Let's throw a party." Then, before anyone could hit him, he hid behind Kaminari's leg. To his surprise, though, he received firm, if hesitant, nods in response. Siro smiled. "That could actually be pretty fun," he said. Sato declared with excitement, "I could make snacks," as he started to mentally recite recipes. Jiro smiled and said, "I have some good playlists." The exclamation, "Ooh, this sounds really good, guys," caused Ashido and Hagakure to leap up and down. Even Todoroki appeared somewhat intrigued by the idea. As he opened his phone, Izuku muttered, a party?" Inko, who was sitting next to him on the train, asked, "What's happening?" Kirishima texted him, "Looks like we're having a class party tomorrow. Can I go?" And he showed her the text. "Of course. Do you need me to drive you? What about clothes? Should I cook something for everyone? What are their allergies and restrictions?" Inko nodded wildly, wiping away the tears that began to well up the moment she saw that her son had received a text from a friend. While the other hand, still in a cast, rested on his sleeping sister's gently oscillating shoulder, he waved his left hand to reassure her, saying, "Hey, I think it's fine, Mom." Looking lovingly at her two dependents, Inko reflected, I can't believe it's only been a little over a month since you started at UA. So much has changed." Izuku laughed. "Yeah, Eri really threw us for a loop, huh? But she's really grown quick, right? Actually, I think you've changed the most." The younger Greenette turned, startled, saying, "What? Really? I guess it's hard to tell if it was starting high school or getting your quirk or all that training you did, but," his mother said, smiling and nodding, "I thought you were absolutely incredible today. I'm really happy with the hero you've become." She took a moment to put her head against her son's. Izuku's hands trembled with anxious expectation as he smoothed out his shirt in the mirror. "All right, the shirt is clean. The pants are ironed and nice. Hair is a complete mess, but it's okay." The sheen from the hair product he and Eri used to try to tame his hair, before it finally came back and locked into its original mane-like shape, made him laugh. Out of the living room, Inko called, "Izuku, your phone is buzzing." Izuku finished adjusting his clothes and walked out of the bathroom, saying, "Thank you." He smiled as he picked up his phone from the coffee table, opened his messaging app, and whistled at the sheer volume of unread notifications. That might have just been Iida having trouble with autocorrect, but I don't believe I've ever had more than 4 unopened texts before, in relation to which. He double-checked for a response by clicking on the speedster's contact. Following the public announcement of Ingenium's injury, Izuku had sent multiple messages the previous evening and morning to inquire about his friend's condition. He hasn't said anything in the class group chat, either. Speaking of that group chat, it was currently overflowing with long, beautifully emotive messages from Hagakure, Ashido, and Kaminari, interspersed with Yaoyorozu's reprimands and responses from the other members. "You ready for the party? Need a ride or anything?" Inko asked with a kind smile, which was the reason for the activity? With a gentle shake of his head, Izuku said, "No, the train should be fine." "Okay. Well, if you miss the last train on the way back, you can call me to come get you, or you can sleep at Katsuki's house." Considering that Bakugo and Izuku had been determined to break each other's ribs for the previous 24 hours, Izuku shuddered at the idea of sharing a room. In addition, oh, don't forget your medication. Izuku slipped into the kitchen and took out 2 tiny tablets from an orange pill container he had picked up earlier that day. "Right. Thanks." The pharmacist recognized him as the sports festival runner-up and decided to loudly announce it to the entire world, or at least that store. He swallowed a quick glug of water, shivering at the bitter taste and the memory of being surrounded by people. When he made a pouty face, his mother laughed and said, "At least, I'm glad you're not enjoying the recovery process. Hopefully you'll remember this the next time you decide to do something like yesterday." "I don't know how many more times I can apologize, Mom." Izuku moaned, feeling both annoyed by her persistent nagging and moved by her good intentions. "You and Eri doing anything while I'm gone?" When she saw how bored both of her children were, the matriarch's eyes brightened and she said, "We're going to have a ladies' night, isn't that right? I'm going to braid her hair, do her nails, and have her try on these cute outfits I found for her." She also said, "And we'll make candy apples." Woo! Eri threw up her arms. Inko lamented her predicament. "Although I have always desired a daughter, this is most definitely not what I had anticipated. Oh, that reminds me, don't come home too late. You and I need to go grocery shopping tomorrow morning." "It has to be in the morning. Someone won't eat anything without apples, so." Izuku gave them both a hug and nodded with a loving smile before putting on his shoes and leaving. He texted the class chat to let them know he was leaving his apartment. He would never be the same again, after 3 hours. Bakugo bellowed, "Fucking Deku. Chug like you mean it." His fists pounded the table so forcefully that the other cups trembled and their clear contents sloshed violently, threatening to splatter their pungent odor onto the exquisite mahogany of the Yaoyorozu manor. In compliance, the previously mentioned Midoriya tipped his head back 180 degrees and let the liquid in his cup run freely down his throat and the rest of his body. He slurred, "I did it," and pulled the empty cup away before giving no one a high five and collapsing onto the marble. As Kaminari drunkenly objected to the resident judge, Jiro, the redhead, turned away from the unconscious Midoriya and gave him the thumbs up as he started frantically gulping his own drink. "Kirishima, your turn." This was his cry. Despite the harshness of his words, the blonde swayed back and forth, his arms flailing loosely, as he said, "See, come on." He didn't even drink a lot of it, and he forgot to do the flippy thingy. "Pichu's desquaw burp disqualified for," Jiro retorted, narrowing her eyes in deep thought, or as deep as possible given the circumstances, before bursting into hearty laughter and falling down as Kirishima finished her cup and immediately started trying to turn it over, while Siro spat out his drink to chastise his flip cup partner. Jiro blew into her earphone jack like a whistle and wiggled her finger, which would have made her head ring if not for her heavy drinking. An hour before, "Hey guy SSSS. We should play the Pocky game," Mina said with a malevolent laugh while holding up a white and blue box, her pink cheeks a vibrant shade of lilac. "I got this," Bakugo exclaimed as he immediately got up and threw his cup to the ground. Without pausing, he approached Kirishima, seized both sides of his face, and smashed their lips together. Bakugo withdrew and yelled, "Merry Christmas fuckers." Victory for Katsuki. As fast as it started, faster than Mina's squeals, and he left without a word. With his face redder than his hair, Kirishima muttered, "Huh. I honestly can't say whose blood this is," he said, touching his lips and pulling his fingers back as his eyes widened at the red liquid splattering on them. Before running around the party floor that Yaoyorozu had set up, dragging random classmates into a circle and setting an empty bottle in the center, Mina made a mental note to never forget that for the rest of her life. "I'm first," she said, spinning the bottle violently and watching with bated breath as it slowly came to a stop on none other than Midoriya. She yelled, "Ha! Yes, this is perfect," amid the cheers and howls of Bakugo and 10 slightly inebriated teenagers. With his face redder than his shoes, Midoriya stammered, "Wait, no, what is this game?" Shoji raised a tentacle to clarify, "You spin the bottle to pick a partner, then you both take either end of a Pocky stick in your mouth and alternate taking bites. First one to break away has to drink." The greenette's expression changed to one of realization. "So we could, KK kiss? Like with a real girl? Or guy, and only if you don't back out." Izuku swallowed uneasily, but his peers' watchful eyes and peer-serving peer pressure prevented him from allowing his awkwardness, saying, "Sure. I've never had alcohol before, though." Mina positioned a pocky stick and teased her partner by wriggling her eyebrows while clamping down on one end. She waited patiently for him to comply, which he did, albeit slowly and nervously. She laughed in private. Everything went as planned. 10 minutes prior. Hey, do you guys want to help me get Midori wasted? The pinkhead said to some of her classmates who were relaxing. After 20 minutes after a few drinks from chickening out, Midoriya quickly drew away, his blush going away, but not by much. Oh no, how do I continue to be chosen? There's nothing fair about it. It almost turned into a minigame to see who could spin him as their partner after Mina showed how easily he would crack. He had been harmed thus far by Hagakure, Shoji, Kaminari, Tokiyami, and the previously mentioned Ishido. Kyoka, you're up, Hagakure said, laughing and likely smiling cheekily as she finished the pocky and gave Jiro a shoulder pat. With a sudden flush of realization, the punk rocker said, oh, pass. A pass? Not scientifically possible. Mina cackled, forcing Jiro's hand onto the bottle and spinning, sensing another chance to tease. As the bottle gradually came to a stop on Kaminari, the students anxiously watched. To tease the pair, they burst into ooh and triple A, which had the opposite effect on the blonde, who was giving himself a violent fist bump. I succeeded. I have a girl. I've been ready for this day for years thanks to manga and online porn. I'll just drink. Jiro blushed horribly and tucked her jack behind her ear as she chugged her drink mindlessly. If the waterfall he later consumed was any indication, something inside Kaminari broke that instant. After 2 drinks, Midoriya's turn to spin came soon after. With his face glowing with Asian glow, Izuku spun the bottle so wildly and carelessly that it danced across the floor before breaking against Yaoyorozu's heels. Oh okay got this. I'm a gonna, hee. The lady of the house's cheeks were lightly dusted with crimson, and she exclaimed, oh my. Mineta was fuming with violent rage behind her, and Kaminari continued to drown his sorrows. With another hiccup, Midoriya held up the pocky stick and said, let's do this Yamamama. This will end now. Tomorrow, I will be the peace symbol. Without missing a beat, he bit down. She avoided his intense stare and bit down too, tucking her hair behind her ear. Oh, I simply had to be vague when speaking to the employees. How could I have been so irresponsible as to forget to order non-alcoholic drinks? Particularly in light of yesterday. To the amusement and yelling of his friends, Midoriya took a particularly large bite, reaching the center of the stick, and his eyes glowed with uncharacteristic mischief. With her eyes wide with excitement, Mina exclaimed, Yao Momo, you have to match that. With each round of the game, Jiro became more uneasy and whispered to Hagakure, is that even allowed? Hick, was all the invisible girl could say. Yaoyorozu swallowed and started to walk slowly. I ought to do it, I'd like to win. I'm worthy of winning. Her eyes met her partner's. Do I? She took a sip from her cup and stepped back. After a moment of stunned silence, Midoriya leapt to his feet and let out a loud roar. Get that shit Deku. Auntie Inko didn't raise no bitch, yelled Bakugo from the adjacent room. Well, that was disappointing. Mina grinned at the round-faced brunette, whose perma blush was brightened even more. Ochako, your turn, she said. She took the bottle, shook it roughly, and nodded with a drowsy smile. Regretfully, Midoriya decided to sit down again at that precise moment, which led to him colliding with the bottle as it was pointing in his direction. The old nemesis. Do you want to exact revenge? That's it? Uraraka's calm expression turned to one of utter panic as he screamed, huh? At the bottle? Come on. You're telling me you haven't at least thought about your precious Deku-kun in this way before? Mina asked, raising a pocky stick and raising her eyebrows once more. Wait and no, I don't think of, I'm not as sure, I'll just paw. But before she could pull a Jiro, Midoriya roared again and hit the bottle with his head, shattering the glass and knocking him out. Shoji deadpanned, I'll be honest, I saw that ending differently. Tokiyami pondered, his stern gaze deceiving anyone who saw those rosy cheeks. If birds had cheeks at all, nothing ever ends. With the exception of Midoriya, everyone applauded when Sato said, hey guys, looking around the corner. First, I made cookies in the kitchen. Second, Bakugo set up flip cup if anybody wants to oof. Oi, Kirishima, icy hot. Pour a drink down Deku's throat and let's get a move on, Bakugo said, pushing Sato's head down and looking past him. Despite Kirishima's attempts to entice him into his mouth with a waved hand, which only made matters worse, Todoroki moved from the corner he was hiding in and emptied his cup onto Midoriya's face. After 3 hours he had entered a state of pure drunken lucidity, and Flower Cup was his game. At this point, Midoriya was little more than a stuttering, swaying mess, possibly due in large part to the King's game they played, where every command seemed to be some variation of, and then take a drink. Only 2 cups remain after my turn. If only they knew, Sharingan, as he looked for the ball underneath the 2 overturned sake bowls, his eyes came to life. With his quirk, however, locating it was a breeze, and he lifted the right cup right away, laughing, Victor. The room went quiet, and then almost everyone started laughing heartily. If you find the ball, you need to drink all the cups that got upturned before. And since everyone was playing, Todoroki, who oddly refused to show him his right side, clarified as the greenette waved around in confusion. After an unspecified period of time? With a start, Midoriya leapt to his feet, his head thumping and his breath ragged. He moaned and clutched his pulsing skull, trying to regain his senses despite the excruciatingly bright lights surrounding him. With a gasp, he opened his eyes and looked around, asking, what happened? Where is everyone? Oh no, where am I? He was pretty sure there was no television studio on the Yaoyorozu Manor, at least not that he could access, intoxicated or not, even though it was undoubtedly extravagant beyond belief. In front of a set of darkened bleachers, a number of cameras, and bright stage lights, he was on the floor beside a desk and a couch. A talk show. For what purpose? The Author-kun Show? Hosted by Author-kun? Izuku scratched his head, trying to pick at his aching brain, and squinted as he turned to the desk. Does that name ring a bell? What is Author-kun? He asked, his vision still blurry from the alcohol. That would be me. A booming voice said as a darkened figure emerged from behind the curtains next to the desk and swiftly took a seat behind it, avoiding the spotlight completely even though it was pointed at him by. Well, no one is here either. No employees or viewers. Izuku stood up slowly and asked cautiously, what is this? Well, this is my talk show, and you're the guest of honor, said the darkened figure, holding out his hands. But who are you? And where is this? He gently stroked his undetectable chin. I suppose this would be confusing for you. Well, first things first. I'm the author of your story. Call me Author-kun. Though I think I'm older than you, so maybe San is in order, or maybe senpai. It doesn't matter. I hate when people use honorifics in English stories anyways. The author of my what? You're actually in a fanfiction, and I'm the writer, said Author-kun, snapping his fingers. And this whole set, he said, pointing to the set, is the world between yours, the fanfiction, and mine, the real world. Wait, are you saying we're inside the fourth wall? Yes. How much did I drink last night? Asked Izuku as he stood motionless and then collapsed onto the couch. More than you know, but also less than you think. Depends on your definition of drink. Wait, what does that mean? And what do you mean, fanfiction? Like those stories written about? Well, I guess anything really. Yup. Here, I'll show you. Author-kun nodded, took out a clicker remote, and pushed a button. A projector screen appeared in front of them, oddly obstructing the view of the imaginary audience. This is you from the canon story of My Hero Academia, he said as he pressed another button, revealing a picture of Izuku in a green jumpsuit resembling the redesign he had just received in the mail. It says, Boku no Hero Academia, on the bottom. I don't care, it's easier to say, my hero, and I don't like weeaboo culture. Wait, you're not a weeaboo? Well, I'm not white, so I think I'm in the clear. I think weeaboo is a personality more than a characteristic. Fuck off. Also, if he's supposed to be from canon, why do we look so similar? Izuku said, rubbing his chin. You're not that similar. Actually, I think we seem totally identical. I made some changes. We're the same exact character. Author-kun screamed, I'm working on it, okay, and clicked to switch from canon Izuku to a buffer image. Literally. Izuku was merely a buffer. The face was oddly dark, resembling Author-kun, and it was meant to be Izuku. The buff Izuku was tall as well, and despite his lack of facial features, he could tell that his counterpart was regarded as extremely attractive. This is what happens when you change too much. You get this guy. I hate this guy. What's wrong with him? This is Izuku Hyodo. He's nothing like you or canon. He's overpowered, solves every problem nearly effortlessly, and is drowning in pussy. Why is his FA he's drowning in what? Do you know what fridging is? Izuku gave a headshake. Author-kun sighed and pressed the remote control once more, displaying a side-by-side image of Kendo. What's that for? Just to illustrate a point. Now, imagine this strong female character. Okay. Now imagine this strong female character is about to be sexually assaulted and or murdered. Wait, what? No. That's awful. Author Kun got up and said, right? That's terrible and totally unnecessary. But thankfully, Izuku Hyodo saves her from that terrible and totally unnecessary fate by, drumroll please, solving the problem effortlessly, emphasizing both how strong he is and how helpless these damsels are. That doesn't sound right. A series of multiple choice questions arose on the screen. It's not. But imagine all this happens to Kendo. What do you think her response is? Is it A. Kendo phones law enforcement, B. Kendo contacts a counselor, C. Kendo flees in a rage due to the trauma she has endured, D. Everything mentioned above, E. Kendo desires to destroy Detroit? By your tone, I'm guessing it's E. It's always E. Every time they're rescued, every girl just falls in love with him. That isn't how relationships work. Author Kun abruptly calmed down. That reminds me of codependent Izuku, but we'll get there. Abruptly, a rumbling came from outside the studio doors. What's that? Izuku braced himself. Izuku Hyodo's extremely popular and tends to attract a very, let's say, toxic group of fans. Just talking about it can excite them. Luckily, I have a deterrent. Author Kun sighed and took out a megaphone. Homosexual lemon warning, roared Author Kun as he cleared his throat and the doors flew open, revealing a crawling swarm of fans. When one courageous soldier yelled, "What gender?" the crowd stopped dead in their tracks. With a laugh, Author Kun said, "Guy on guy." Shouting in horror at the terror Author Kun had created, the masses fled more quickly than they had come. Hee, casual homophobia. Ignoring that, why is his face obscured? Probably because half of the time, those authors add on unnecessary traits to Izuku Hyodo's character. Typically a very specific song and or hobby. That makes it clear he's a self-insert character disguised as an Izuku. Author Kun pondered as he sat back down. Author Kun sighed and took a swig from a flask. The chaotic good Elseworlds version of Izuku turned away from the screen and said, "You sound really upset." Not gonna lie. This shit is really annoying. Like, way to shit on the source material, especially this source material, by completely changing every aspect of the main character when you clearly just want to write an OC. It sounds kinda fun though. The author cleared his throat and pressed the remote control, revealing an Izuku holding hands with someone off screen. Oh for sure. I'm subscribed to like 10 of them. This is a similarly annoying version of you in fanfictions. Codependent Izuku. Company dependent? This Izuku found love? Wait, really? Shut up, you're getting some too, at some point. Anyways, this Izuku found love, and while charming at first, quickly this relationship spirals until neither character is willing to leave the other's side. Like codependent Izuku and his girlfriend, or boyfriend, literally can't do one thing separate from each other. I don't know, that sounds kinda nice. Author Kun suddenly grabbed Izuku's face in his hands and said, "Trust me, dude. It's not. No relationship where you spend every waking moment together works. I get annoyed if I see them every day, much less at all hours." His eyes were finally unobscured, revealing wide, scared brown irises. That sounds like you have your own issues, SSSSH. Author Kun covered Izuku's mouth with one hand and stroked his hair with the other. You're beginning to sound like my ex-boyfriends. Then, take a hint. Author Kun returned to his desk and pressed the remote control, bringing up an Izuku wearing a vest. That was it. This is villain Izuku. His authors are low-key sadists and have probably recently watched a YouTube video on Bakunin and or the Marvel movies and think they have a grasp on writing moral conflict. Wait, I'm a villain? But, I've wanted to be a hero my entire life. It's like, my identity. Well, it usually works well enough based on your backstory, but sometimes they go overboard with it and turn you into a sociopath. But usually you're busy giving grandiose speeches about heroism or bullying and or being balls deep in Himiko Toga. Wait, who? Another Izuku appeared with another click. He was crying in the fetal position, though, and said, "This is depressed Izuku. He lives to suffer. People want to write about me like this?" The writer sighed. "I'm sure it's cathartic or creative or something. Or maybe people like torturing fictional characters. Either way, I'm too scared to explore more in depth." Wait, why? What do they do to me? Moving on. Another click brought up another Izuku, this one with a halo over his head that glowed. "This one is special to me. This is creatively done Izuku. He's you but with a twist or two. You can see how he got to where he is based on the differences between him and Canon Izuku, but they're still the same character at the core. He's the best. Author Kun laughed as a tear fell from the corner of his eye. Master Redgrass and Silvertrees, this is all for you. So where do I fall? If I'm a fanfiction version of Canon Izuku, then which version am I? Izuku asked, scratching his head. He's taking everything, huh? This with remarkable ease. Well, technically, there's a hidden group of Izukus that I admit I might fraternize with. Really? What is it? Author Kun reluctantly pressed the remote control once more, revealing, Canon Izuku? Izuku turned to his companion and asked, what do you mean? Totally original take on the character, no totally, I swear, was written in place of the word, canon, after Author Kun sighed and took out a Sharpie. Then, with shame etched on his invisible face, he turned to face his creation. Is it from a lack of creativity or, nope, not doing this. See you at the lemon chapter, can't wait for you to skimp on foreplay and forget to lay a towel down. The what chapter? With a start, Izuku leapt to his feet, the first rays of the morning peeking through Yaoyorozu's parlor curtain. Oddly, it had become eerily quiet. Actually, aside from a single figure pouting in the shadows, it was completely deserted. Yaoyorozu, Izuku said, getting to his feet with surprising ease considering how inebriated he had anticipated being. Her voice was even more monotonous than he had imagined, and as she turned to face him, he nearly shrank back from the gloomy look on her otherwise endearing face. Oh. Hello Midoriya. Sleep well? She said. Wah, what happened? Where is everyone? With a grim laugh, she said, well. 3 hours prior, hey, let's play the spin the bottle. Yes. Great idea. You down, Jiro? Not if you're playing. When Mineta exclaimed, ooh, this is what I've been waiting for. Asui used her tongue to slap him across the face. You can't play. Huh? Yeah, that sounds fair. Probably for the best. WHO invited him? Perhaps due to his heart stopping, Mineta was paralyzed for a few moments before screaming and yelling, well, you wanna know what's not for the best? 8 hours prior, Mineta took a sip of the rice juice that Yaoyorozu, or probably her servants, had made. She probably didn't purchase this, even though it's just plain juice. I'm going to have to play this smart if I want a chance at throwing the crazy high school party of my dreams. Mineta said, hey Yaoyorozu, this is some great sake. After a moment of panic, the sheltered rich girl realized who was speaking. Huh? She asked. I know you're depraved but you can't tell that's just juice? Mineta smirked in private while pretending to be upset, his scheme developing in nefarious detail. After half an hour, cheers to your win, Mineta said as he walked up to Todoroki and offered him his cup. Have we spoken before? The heterochromic teenager asked, cocking his head and looking down. Is this guy the popular kid? Well no, but I figured why waste good alcohol, right? Said Mineta, smiling as he shook off his anger. This is alcoholic? Todoroki asked, intrigued by that. He took the cup and looked at its contents, asking, is it sake or something? Looks sort of like the stuff from home. Oh, this is too simple. Mineta gave an innocent nod. Sure is. Yaoyorozu really sprang for the good stuff. Guess Jiro really collected a ton of money from us, huh? Why don't you go over there and thank them? Todoroki nodded goodbye and walked over to Jiro and Yaoyorozu. Guess that would be appropriate. Thank you. The girls' shocked expressions made it too obvious what had happened, even though Mineta couldn't hear what they were saying. The visible slurring and almost instantaneous swaying were the cherry on top. The rest of the work will be done for me by word of mouth. I'm coming, Pocky game. Wow. I truly forget Mineta's intelligence. Or perhaps Todoroki is simply naive. Still, I can't believe we all fell for it. Hey, turns out a bunch of aspiring high schoolers who spent all their time focusing on getting into a prestigious academy might not know what alcohol tastes like. Whoops. Despite the situation, she doesn't appear to be alright. So everyone just left after he dropped that on you? She replied, I don't think any of us could look each other in the eye. Kyoka and Tsuyu did take Mineta somewhere but I don't know anything besides that. Still I'm a little amazed you fell for it. That makes one of us. I mean you always seem so smart and put together. If anyone would have caught on, I thought it would have been you. Yaoyorozu became alert and gave Midoriya a serious look. His face heated up after a beat. Whoa, did that sound impolite? God, that was really humiliating. Sorry, Is that really how I seem? There was a slight sparkle behind her eyes as she gave him an even more serious look. I mean, yeah. It's only been like a month or so, but you're already probably the smartest person I've ever met. I mean, Kaminari and I would probably be dead if you hadn't come up with that stuff at USJ. Yaoyorozu turned away, but he could see a small, melancholy smile appear on her face as she said, after yesterday, or I guess 2 days ago now, I don't feel like myself. I mean, I lost so handily. Izuku sat down beside her and asked, your match against Tokiyami? I didn't get to see it, but I heard he was heavy on offense. Izuku also mentioned how brief it was, but she doesn't need that at the moment. She raised her eyebrows. It's not just that, it's that I couldn't do anything. I was so slow. No, that's not it. It was like I couldn't make a decision and I got caught in my own head. She then glanced at him, not like you though. You managed to improve so quickly and nearly beat Todoroki. And he's so powerful. And then Tokiyami's so efficient. It's like when I see you all, I just feel inadequate. After taking a deep breath and examining his bandaged hand, Izuku said, I think I have the opposite problem. I try to stick to a plan, but when I get backed into a corner, way too often I just default to what's instinctual instead of what's reasonable. And sure, I'm happy I could help Todoroki, but I have to wonder if it would have been better to play it safe and just talk it through. It's nice not to be concerned about harming myself as well. After tapping her chin, Yaoyorozu shook her head and said, respectfully, I disagree. It was Izuku's turn to appear taken aback. Long term, yes, it's better to think things through. But heroism, or at least my vision of it, comes down to the moment where we choose whether or not to act. Obviously, you shouldn't throw your body around, but maybe don't count out your instincts just yet. For a long time, they sat in pleasant silence until Todoroki came over from the adjacent room, holding a hand over his right cheek and saying, good morning. Yaoyorozu gasped, wait, Todoroki? You're still here? What happened to your face? Hey, I remember he was hiding it last night too. Did something happen? His hand dropped reluctantly, exposing a deep red flush. My scar masks it on the left side, but, he said. Yaoyorozu deadpanned, Todoroki, the rice juice was just juice. I heard. Then why is your face still red? Determination. I'm gonna have my driver take you both home. Yeah, that sounds good. Can he take me to the hospital? After 2 hours with the exception of one thread, the group chat was silent. Jiro. So last night was a bust? Suyu. I agree. Sato. That sounds good. Deku. That would be better. Kirishima. Well, I enjoyed myself. Bakugo. I'm going to murder you. Zero. Kiss Bakugo is no longer in the chat. Still wiping the sleep from his bleary eyes, Izuku yawned into his phone and said, hello? Midoriya. It's Recovery Girl. All Might gave me your number. Why yes ma'am. He said as he immediately stood at attention, any remaining rest gone. Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, I'm getting a phone call from a pro hero. Besides All Might. Wow, that's really lost its splendor after a year. Can you bring Eri in again? I was hoping to do some quirk analysis and figure out what happened on Friday, she said, clearing her throat across the line. He turned his head to see the young girl, who wasn't in the bed when he went to sleep, slowly stretching herself out on it. Oh, I totally forgot that she had healed me from everything that transpired with Todoroki and Iida after that. When did I start having such a fascinating life? Okay, I'll just let my mom know. Excellent. I'll be by your apartment shortly. In theory, being able to ride shotgun with a pro hero, especially one as iconic as Recovery Girl, sounded amazing, and with the stormy weather we were having right now, it was definitely better than taking the train. In theory. Suppressing the urge to throw up, Izuku said, why the train, gulp, would have been really fine. Eri attempted to nod, but it was ineffective. With a dismissive wave of her hand, Recovery Girl removed her booster seat, which would have been adorable in a different situation. Nonsense. Can't have my precious Eri-chan walk around in this unholy weather. She grinned and patted the child's head, which made her nausea worse, saying, looks like she's coming down with something. Izuku gave the kid a back rub. I wouldn't rule out a concussion following that drive. I'll take her to my office now, if that's alright with you. We'll probably be finished after lunch if you want to get her then, the youthful heroine said, locking her car and holding Eri's hand. When he attempted to nod, the encroaching bile returned with a vengeance, so he opted for a thumbs up instead. At least I have plenty of time to get comfortable before the start of class. He walked slowly to the lockers and started carefully bending down to change his shoes. God, it's worse when you bend over. It's far worse. After a while, He was cut off by a familiar hand as a familiar voice yelled, "Up and at it, Midoriya! Only 10 minutes until class starts." Izuku leapt to his feet, disregarding the screams coming from his inner ear canal, and said, "Iida. Hey, how have you been? How's Ing the first mean your brother?" Putting a hand on his friend's shoulder, the taller boy said, "I'm well, thank you. And he's in stable condition. But how was the class party? I haven't had the chance to look through my messages. Maybe he can help me find out what happened to Mineta." But Izuku blushed and smiled sheepishly, avoiding eye contact, saying, Well, nothing interesting happened. Don't worry about catching up." Iida waved goodbye, leaving Midoriya to ponder. "Ah, well, as long as you all had fun. Anyways, I'll go make sure everyone else is ready for class. Sorry again if I caused you any undue worry over the last couple days." He appears to be doing well. Totally typical, completely back to how it was. Then he noticed that his friend's posture was a little unsteady. There was a slight shift in his posture, as though something might burst and spill. Or perhaps burst forth. The tremor was the result of someone pushing something back down in an attempt to preserve an appearance of calm on the outside at the expense of internal conflict. In essence, from the ages of 4 to 14, it had been Izuku's default state. He's not doing well. If Aizawa hadn't come into homeroom with news of internships and without any bandages, Midoriya would have been much more troubled by Iida's obviously inadequate handling of his brother's injury. Behind him, a bar graph displaying all of the students with formal offers flashed on the blackboard screen as Aizawa deadpanned, gesturing to the data on the screen. "There's a bit of an outlier. Or 3. This year, but a fair few of you still got offers. 3,123 Todoroki Bakugo. 2,303 2,286 in Midoriya. 323 Tokiyami Iida. 301 Uraraka. 200. Kaminari. 172 Kirishima. 68 Yaoyorozu. 28. Siro. 11. Ashido. 3. Izuku almost jumped out of his chair when he exclaimed, "I got offers." He turned around and said, "Mineta, did you see? I got offers." With eyes devoid of life and soul, the shortest student in Class 1A gave Midoriya a thumbs up in the most egregious of ways. His hair-like balls, which were typically a rich violet, were shriveled in a sad, faded lilac, and his skin was taut and sallow. "What did you do to Asui, Jiro?" Uraraka gave Iida a hard shake, almost crying, and Kirishima was in the middle of consoling Ashido and giving Kaminari a crazed high five. "Come on, 3's not bad. Some of us didn't get any offers." "Yeah. And besides, it's not like you could have done anything against Todoroki in the Furyao." Kaminari interrupted, but was interrupted when Jiro stabbed him in the ears and blasted him with sound. When Todoroki said, "I'm pretty sure most of them are because of my father's connections," he merely shook his head, which infuriated many students who recalled a string of enormous ice walls that seemed to indicate otherwise. "I guess I should be grateful I got any at all." Yaoyorozu exhaled a sigh from relief. After her poor performance against Tokiyami, and being overshadowed by everything Hatsume was displaying in the previous match, Aizawa briefly worried that she would be forgotten when she announced the internships. "This is where I'm going to start. I will no longer question myself in." It's weird that Midoriya got less offers than Bakugo," said Sato, scratching his cheek. Siro, grateful to God that no one was remarking on his performance, tried to explain, "I guess those last few minutes against Todoroki must have spooked some of the pros. At least I'm not last." Ribbit. Also, Midoriya isn't nearly as memorable as Bakugo. He also tends to fade into the background when grouped up, so his performance in the cavalry battle might have gone past some heads. It's not unlikely that some of the pros just forgot. Izuku started to perspire. "Asui, I assumed we were friends." His literal knight in shining armor, sees Mensongs. Monsieur Midoriya is an icon, fortunately defended him. "Aoyama, I will never forget this generosity." The brilliant Frenchman raised his phone and said, "Regarde. Midoriya and Awase are famous. There's enough fan art to fill the Louvre." The screen was far away, and there were too many pictures to count, but Midoriya felt bad about who was responsible for igniting the trend. "Midnight Sensei, damn you. I'd save those pictures if I was you. No telling when I'll have to take mine down." Talk about the devil. With a sadistic smile and a stroking of her whip, the R-rated hero walked in the door. Her penchant for underage yaoi aside, "Midnight's here to make sure you all are ready for your internships next week," Aizawa said. Ojiro shivered a little as he said, "Ready how? We already fought villains at USJ," remembering the particularly tense incident. You might be relatively ready for the rigors of your internships, but something just as important is being able to apprehend villains, which none of you should really be doing without your license anyway, is your identity. Midnight responded with unexpected assurance and gravity. She explained, this will be the first time you appear in public wearing your costumes. To the average citizen, that means you'll be seen as a hero. While you don't have the responsibilities of one yet, you should have certain elements for practicality's sake. Most notably, your hero names. The class was filled with silenced confusion. The class erupted in cheers and whoops of excitement at the chance to further establish themselves as legitimate heroes in training, as if a bomb had gone off. It was difficult to overlook the sadistic undertones in Midnight's face, as her smile flickered up and down. Of course, I'll have you read them out loud to the whole class. Just so you have an idea of what public perception to your name will be. One thing was agreed upon by the entire class. She is seeking public humiliation, isn't she? With the exception of Aizawa, who curled up almost instantly, the process was difficult for everyone, though some people had more difficulty than others. Midnight, who was obviously unaccustomed to the torture being reversed, pinched her nose and said, for the last time, Bakugo, you cannot call yourself anything with murder in it. Then what am I supposed to say? How about just, Lord Explosion? My hearing cut out for a moment there. What did you say? You can also call yourself, King Explosion, or something along those lines. Nah, it happened again. It's like whenever you open your mouth, I'm filled with so much rage, my hearing cuts out. With a malicious twitch of her eye, the R-rated hero extended her flail, ready to beat the boy to within an inch of his life. Fortunately, Aizawa's danger sense activated, and he immediately acted, draping Bakugo back to his seat and ensnaring him in the capture weapon before dozing off. Uraraka walked to the podium, sweat dropping, and gave her name. Now it's just Kachan and Iida, I suppose. I have a ton of ideas, but now that I have to make a decision, I'm completely at a loss. Looking at his hero notebook in his bag, Midoriya recalled the dozens of variations of All Might he had thought of as a child and, if he was being truthful, last year. However, I'm not yet prepared to take over his role. I am not, and perhaps never will be, a hero like him. That is not how I can tarnish his legacy. Iida stared at his own blank slate across the classroom, his thoughts reliving the events of the previous few days. 3 days prior, as his sobbing mother made an unsuccessful attempt to soothe him, Iida stormed through the doors of Tensai's hospital room. As soon as the world around him vanished and he was left alone with his brother's shivering, broken form, he felt his breath catch. From head to toe, Ingenium was covered in bandages, particularly on his arms. Tensai's once shining, sturdy golden mufflers were broken, bent, and cracked as they poked through the gauze. One eye was glazed over and the other was swollen shut. The only sound to break his ragged and weak breathing was the soft whispered word, SS Stain. Tenya ran to his brother's bedside and exclaimed, Tensai! Tensai! Look at me! Snap out of it! Tensai! He could hear the doctor talking to him and feel his mother's arm gently pushing him back, but he didn't pay any attention. Iida only experienced the heartbreaking knowledge that Ingenium, his ideal and the driving force behind his hero status, was no longer there. Tenya's blood boiled with unfathomable rage at that. Now as Ingenium's brother and the son of the Iida family, don't worry, Tensai. I'll put things right. I'll repay you, no matter what. He was able to collect himself by walking to the front of the class before introducing his hero name, Iida. Your surname? Are you sure you want to go with that? This is the hero I want to be. I want to do right by my family, said the class president, nodding and grinning slightly. Steam exploded from Midnight's face as she exclaimed, oh how joyous, I just love a family man. With his head raised off the floor, Aizawa said, he's 15. Without hesitation, she responded, you know what my deal is, approved. Unaware of the eyes staring at him, Iida nodded and returned to his chair. Well, take care of your family. After clearing her throat and gathering her thoughts, Midnight said, ahem. Midoriya, we're just waiting on you. Bakugo snarled, the fuck? I still haven't gone? Only one to go. Don't you fucking ignore me. Just. Midoriya. I didn't really have an idea of what I wanted to be called until Iida went, but if my name should represent the hero that I want to be, then I think this is the only choice, Midoriya said, stumbling shyly past the combative pair and taking a deep breath before revealing his board. Playing devil's advocate with caution, Kirishima scratched his head and asked, are you sure, dude? Isn't that an insult? Izuku gave a nod. It started like that, sure, but lately I've been hearing it in a different context a lot more and, well, I think I'd like others to see me the same way. Deku. So you're going to Gunhead's agency? Izuku asked, looking up from the printout Aizawa had given him, which included information on the agency's locations, specialties, and noteworthy accomplishments, as well as a list of all of his offers arranged by rank. Regretfully, the list was as lengthy as a book, which was impressive given that Aizawa had completed the task for every other student in just 2 days. He sleeps a lot during the day, which makes sense. Yup. Uraraka nodded passionately. Izuku placed his hand on his chin. He specializes in close-quarters combat, so I guess it matches your quirk, but did you not get any offers from a rescue-oriented agency? I would have thought they'd line up to borrow you for a week considering how useful canceling gravity is. Well, that's my goal, but after fighting Kirishima, I realized that I might have a knack for martial arts. Then Bakugo showed me just how much farther I have left to go. She blushed through the compliment and rubbed her arm. Besides, getting stronger can only give me more options as a hero, right? The latter said with a proud snicker from the front seat. Midoriya's heart constricted. Such fervor. Oh hey, it's that ugly face you make. I feel like I haven't seen it in a while. He blushed now, saying, sorry, I can't help it. She asked, so what about you, any agencies you're leaning towards? As she looked over his shoulder at his papers, getting close enough to make him blush. I mean, there are so many that sound amazing. Ranking-wise, it makes sense to stick with Edgeshot. Beyond that, he also has a similar combat style to what I'm building towards. But then if I use that as a metric, maybe I should choose Death Arms and get better at brute force. That'll also give me the chance to work with Kamui Woods since they team up so often, and that'll afford me a chance to see pros work together up close. Of course, I also want to address my weaknesses, so maybe I should take up Wash's offer. The damn nerd got an offer from Wash? Bakugo almost spat out. Todoroki appeared taken aback as well. Wash-sama? That hero is the only man Endeavor fears, he frightens him. But Backdraft is more local and has a similar focus on mid to long range, so that might be more convenient. Additionally, Asui made it clear I lack presence, so a hero like Shishido or His Purple Highness might help me get better at that. Yaoyorozu's family connection brought back memories of a meeting she had with His Purple Highness. Though Uwabami sounds promising, I have a sneaking suspicion that things won't work out. Izuku inhaled deeply before blushing in realization, saying, sorry. I didn't think I'd get that far. People usually stop me before I finish. And I really need to focus on my appearance more so I can capitalize on the momentum after the sports festival and my new name. Me too. Moaned Midnight. With a spray bottle featuring a cat logo, Aizawa said, I reiterate, they're children. Uraraka was in stunned silence as Midnight was made even wetter, I'm not sorry. He is totally preoccupied with being a hero. Every time I feel like I'm giving it my all, he reminds me of how much more work I still have to do. Uraraka grinned and punched his shoulder, which hurt more than he felt comfortable admitting. Gunhead is undoubtedly the right choice, saying, man, that was really cool sounding, Deku. I'm really happy you're so gung-ho about this, and that I got to help you pick your hero name. Since Eri calls me Deku ni, I don't have the courage to tell her that I picked it. Yes, definitely, glad you caught that. But Iida, I'm surprised you went with something so basic as your hero name. You're normally so flashy. Well, it felt like the best way to honor my family's legacy. Especially with, Iida said, grinning slightly from across the room as his friends approached. The smile vanished, and his face darkened. He looked away quickly, but his friends understood the gesture. Uraraka gently placed a hand on his shoulder and asked, because of your brother? But he shrugged it off. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. I suppose you'll hear it on the news at some point, but my brother's injuries were pretty serious. He'll be out of commission for a while, Iida said, pausing before turning around once more with the same smile on his face. As the lunch bell rang, the three of them remained in awkward silence for a while, not knowing what to say next. I am opening the door like a normal person. All Might threw open the sliding door so forcefully that the building must have shook, saying, sorry to disturb you during lunch, kids, but I need to steal young Midoriya. Fortunately, the tension breaker of all tension breakers rushed through the classroom. Izuku pointed to himself as though he had forgotten whose successor he was. Huh? Right now? He asked. Indeed. Recovery girl asked me to get you, so here I am fulfilling my obligation to a colleague. Oh right. Gotta get Eri. Bakugo hardly made an explosion in response to the question, she's here. But it felt like a bomb went off in the classroom. Why yes? Like a regiment of soldiers, they devoured their meal quickly before putting together all the elements of a good playdate. Aizawa began packing Midnight into his sleeping bag, I won't let you corrupt this one. Koda called forth his animal companions. Yaoyorozu looked up the chemical formula for various candies, and Aoyama dug up some fairy tales. Deku, huh? I like it. It's snappy and easy to remember. Thanks. It was the only thing I could really think of though, to be honest, Izuku said, grinning at his mentor's compliment. Really? I would have thought you had a million ideas in those notebooks of yours? Well, he said, flushed deeply. Before remembering who his pupil was, All Might arched an eyebrow and said, right. Fanboy. Got it. Before the larger remembered his second reason for dragging the boy, they strolled in pleasant silence. By the way, you got some more offers earlier today. He handed Izuku another sheet that had a number of hero stats on it. Izuku sighed as he accepted the offer list. A couple months ago, I would have been thrilled to be acknowledged by just one hero. But now that I have to make a decision, I sorta wish I had fewer choices. The struggles of popularity. Well, on the bright side, I stole a peek at your list so I can offer some recommendations. Really? What do you think I should do? Working with Edgeshot, who is among the top 5 in the entire nation, would help you get ready for what lies ahead. Of course, it's always a good idea to concentrate on the smaller, more local heroes you'll occasionally be collaborating with. In that category, I personally suggest Pancration, but you could also defy expectations and go with Gran Torino. Who? I'm sorry. IFY you'd like to my old homeroom teacher, G Gran TT Torino has. He wreck. Damn it Toshinori, stop shaking. All Might acquiesced, greatly nauseated by the idea in front of him. Earlier today, he sent you an offer. Izuku Midoriya was terrified by a lot of things, but maybe nothing more than witnessing his mentor, the most powerful person on the planet, shudder in terror. What the hell? After my mentor passed away, he assisted me in tea training and was her sworn friend. I told him about you and our collaboration, and my goodness, he believes I'm a bad mentor. He will injure me once more. All Might began whimpering, no Sorihiko dono, you mate, repeatedly, almost assuming the fetal position. It was only a few more steps. The other students were staring at him and All Might, especially now, and the more he heard about Gran Torino, the more he wished he hadn't, so Izuku made the decision to go into the nurse's office. Deku ni. My strength is back, Hey, how was it? He gave Eri a loving pat on the head. My horn was shaved. I use a file to take a sample of her horn, said Recovery Girl, laughing from her desk and presenting a tiny vial filled with a tiny amount of a yellow-white powder. I'm currently analyzing its composition using mass spectrometry. Why? He asked, lifting his sister into his arms and letting her play with his phone. Is there a strange quality to it? I don't know, the heroine shrugged. Many people have horns with distinctive chemical structures, despite the world's peculiarities. For example, an Ashido in your class has horns that are different in composition and function from someone who, say, has a rhino quirk. We can use analysis to narrow down its potential mechanism because we already know that her quirk factor is concentrated around her forehead. So there are rhino quirks by finding in weight? Pay attention, sorry. You might be able to determine her quirk by figuring out the horn's structure. That's one reason, but I also have a suspicion that her horn is the source of her quirk, she said, calling the siblings to her desk and bringing up 2 photos of Eri, one from today and the other from her first visit to Ua a few weeks prior. Notice how the images differ from one another. I really enjoy this game. Really? The adults asked, looking down at the child in astonishment. With a fierce nod, Eri said, we would play this at the, sorry. The child abruptly pulled away and assumed the submissive stance she had adopted when she first met Izuku. Hey, how are you? I'm assuming she's still sensitive about the past because she flinched at the touch before moving away a little when he bent down and patted her head. Eri, I actually bought a treat for you, said Recovery Girl, who was a true professional. If you want one, there are some apple-flavored popsicles in the back refrigerator. I can go on with Midoriya. The child nodded silently and walked to the back room. What was that? Izuku whispered instantly. It's been a long time since I've seen her so shut down. She's done that with me a few times, but always when I ask about those scars on her arm or anything about her history, she said, letting out a sigh and leaning back in her chair. This behavior in children is nearly always associated with a form of traumatic stress disorder. As soldiers receive. Yes, it is similar. I don't want to make any hasty assumptions, though, because it's very uncommon in children and usually manifests differently in these situations. She does, however, exhibit a strong bond with her caregivers, you and your mother, as well as a concurrent aversion to unpleasant stimuli, which essentially supports our suspicions of abuse. Disgusted, depressed, and angry, Izuku said, "So her guardians before us, they really did abuse her. That's actually the third reason I've been examining her so thoroughly, to see if anything about her matches any child on record," Recovery Girl said, nodding solemnly. "If we have a family history on file, we can not only better identify her quirk but also learn more about her background and identify her. However, I assumed All Might already had his friend working in law enforcement to connect her to missing people. True, we found no matches. Now, we're just trying to determine if she exists at all." "What does that mean?" Similar to the hero registry Izuku was worrying about earlier, a number of data screens appeared on the screen. "When your mother took in Eri, we treated it like a foreign adoption. It made for a quicker process and asked fewer questions. Now that your family has a claim to her, it's important we find out if anyone else does. Beyond identifying her background, we want to make sure nobody can enforce a legal argument for custody," was one of the statements that appeared on the screen. Izuku sat down and let out a deep breath, saying, "And have her go back to her abusers. That's a lot to think about. Don't worry about it, though. We have enough evidence to fight any custody battle. It's more about preparing than anything. The really pressing issue is her quirk," Recovery Girl said, placing a reassuring hand on his knee. "Oh right. So what's the difference in that photo from earlier?" Pulling up the images again, she said, her horn shrunk. It was accurate. Eri's horn was noticeably shorter than it had been previously, albeit only slightly. But how? Why? "I have way too many theories, but the two prominent ones are that her horn is either tied to stress, which raises unneeded connections to Destro, or it represents her ability to use her quirk itself." He gave it some thought. "So it's like a pool that she can draw power from? Since her quirk is some kind of healing, her horn shrank because she used her power on me at the festival? I would have him do research if he weren't so determined to be a hero." The youthful heroine took off her glasses and grinned, saying, "If I'm right, Eri would actually have a much more robust healing quirk than my own. If the timing had been different, she might have even been able to save All Might. Right. I think Eri's horn stockpiles power that she can use to power healing, not dissimilar to One for All, though I don't think your power regresses with use. So if she could control it, she really could heal All Might?" He. "Yes, the child ought to become a doctor. I don't know about now. We've had to remove entire organs and healing that would require regeneration, which hasn't been seen in any generation so far. Even if quirks get stronger with our descendants, it would be a hell of a mutation for someone to be able to do that. Granted, though, we already determined her quirk is mutagenic in nature, so I can't rule out that maybe she could help manage his symptoms and buy him more time in muscle form." "Then let's get them both in here and now," exclaimed Izuku as he leapt to his feet, grinning with excitement. "Think boy," declared Recovery Girl, brandishing her cane angrily. "She can't control it yet, and even then, don't put that on her." Sheepishly, he sat down again and turned his head away, saying, Sorry. Your master has a terrible habit of forcing responsibility onto you. Speaking of which, I have your pain medication, and you'd be wise not to inherit that from him." But, I do want to live up to his expectations. I want to be his honest-to-God successor." She murmured, "You idolize the man too much, though I suppose Sorihiko will beat that out of you soon enough." "Sorihiko? That's All Might's old teacher's real identity, right? Gran Torino?" Izuku cocked his head. "Indeed. A real troublemaker, but a good man. Better hero, too. All Might likely would have died a long time ago if Torino hadn't taught him so well. I guess he followed through on sending you the offer then?" the elderly doctor said with a smile when her old friend was mentioned. "Yeah, he sent it earlier today I guess, but I've never heard of Gran Torino," he said, nodding and taking out the form that All Might had given him. "And I'm the biggest hero fan in the world." "Yeah, he only taught for a year at UA for All Might's sake and stuck mostly underground otherwise. But he was sworn friends with All Might's mentor, studied under her mentor for a bit, and made All Might into the symbol of peace. There's probably nobody alive with a greater understanding of One for All. Other than One. Oh, there I go running my big mouth. Why don't you take a popsicle for the road and head back to class with Eri?" she said, holding out another pill bottle, the rest of his prescription, as the warning bell rang to indicate that lunch was over. After taking the medicine, Izuku got to his feet and bowed, saying, "Thanks for everything, Recovery Girl." As he walked away with her sister, she grinned. It's undeniable that he has at least added interest to life at UA. He'll be a great hero despite all of his carelessness and recklessness, or at least he will be after Sorihiko beats the living daylights out of him. Izuku was sweating outside the clinic when he noticed his mentor still curled up and muttering to himself. "Is that how I appear, All Might? I think I'm going to Gran Torino's for the internship. He was startled out of his reverie by that and said, really? Excellent. Good for you. I'll remember you fondly. Right. Anyways, I gotta head back, so I'll see you at training later. As they made their way back to the classroom, Eri waved her popsicle stick and said, bye Mr. Might. Yes. Good talk, young Midoriya. Wait, you didn't get to eat lunch. Again? Unacceptable. Hold on, my boy. The bentos are on the way. After a week, Tenya Iida trailed his temporary mentor, the normal hero, Manuel, closely as they patrolled the cheerful streets of Hosu. The amiable pro reflected, I was actually really surprised to receive your acceptance, Iida. Yes, well, I found your agency to be the most ideal choice for me and what I hope to do over this week. The armored student looked up from his thoughts. This is technically correct. You mean find the hero killer? Manuel asked, pausing and turning to face the boy with a slight, empathetic smile. Iida recoiled more than he felt comfortable doing, which was a lot given his usual expression of, I don't know what to say. With a pat on his intern's shoulder, the older of the two said, I see a lot of myself in you, Iida. I've been vengeful before, and let me tell you, it's not worth it. Moral reasoning aside, you're also still a student and unauthorized to act independently. Manuel turned around and added, just think carefully about what kind of hero you want to be. But that's enough heavy stuff for now. Let's get on with the patrol. After failing to elicit a response from the boy and giving up on attempting to read his feelings through the armor, Iida couldn't help but clench his fists in a fit of rage as they resumed their leisurely walk. What kind of hero I want to be is irrelevant. No longer. Not after his actions. Said. He was, in fact, not far from the two, sitting on top of a hidden water tower in the middle of the day with a twisted smirk on his face. A black swarm of mist appeared behind the hero killer, swirling around and around until it took the general silhouette of a man wearing a bartender's outfit and a sort of metal neck brace. To sit so casually during the noontime, you must be every bit as capable as the reports say. Either that or he's totally out of touch with reality. Both are very likely. Stain said, I've heard of you. Last I checked, you were even more wanted than me, as his fingers tensed, ready to draw one of his many weapons, and his eyes darted enthusiastically to the side. Chuckling sheepishly, perhaps at one point, but your more recent moves have made you quite the figurehead in the public's eye. A mystery man moving from place to place across the region, crippling and killing heroes left and right. That's certainly more terrifying than a ragtag bunch of lowlifes that got dismantled by a few kids. Sycophant all you want, I didn't call myself a League of Villains like some comic book character. Touché. But is that why you came here? To join my quest of villainy? Stain asked, turning his head and placing a hand on one of his knives. The blade emerged from its sheath with a flick of his thumb. He says that as if it were a negative thing. It's best to be safe. I just want to talk. We can return to my hideout if you'd like. Get you out of the open and discuss things over drinks. Lead the way. Stain sighed and resheathed the blade after tightening his hold. Izuku's mind wandered to Iida and their brief farewell at the train station as he made his way to the address for Gran Torino's agency. He remains so unyielding and deceitful. But if he won't let me in, I can't reach him. Perhaps I should fight him. In that regard, I'm 2 for 2. He glanced at his hand scars and the memory of being hit in the face by a howitzer. No, I'm fine. At last he reached the right building, if that's what it is. The phrase, cobbled together hodgepodge of brick and mortar that also survived a nuclear attack but poorly, would be more appropriate. All Might became the symbol of peace because of this guy? A light knock was sufficient to open the shoddily constructed door, revealing a small elderly man sitting in a pool of some red liquid, wearing oversized yellow spandex and a blank expression. Hello, this is Izuku Midoriya from UA. I'm here to intern under Gran Torino. Toshinori? Before a sudden blast of rock-hard wind kicked him in the chest and sent him flying off the stoop and onto the street below, Izuku said, Excuse me. Or perhaps it was a tiny leg traveling at sound speed. His mind was not in the best of shape right now. What? He told me you had enhanced perception and good reflexes. Guess he's mistaken. Go figure. Izuku looked up, ignoring the burning pain in his sternum, and saw a hero who was proudly posing. This was a far cry from the previous simple and valid act, Gran Torino? The one and only. Now come on, show me what you got, neophyte, said the elderly man, grinning and brushing himself off. Be honest, you only chose my agency because of my ranking, yes? Not being able to look the number 4 hero and those piercing baby blues in the eyes, Bakugo gritted his teeth and averted his gaze. With a quiet laugh, Best Jeanist said, "I'll take that as a big yes, then. It's okay, of course. I did send you the offer after all. I've been looking for someone just like you, so wild and matted. Heroes and villains are more frequently confused than most superiors would like to acknowledge, but do you know how they first distinguished between the two? This occurred back in the United States many generations ago." Bakugo scowled and said, "Tisk, just say it so we can move on." One of the sidekicks in the area yelled, "Dude, pay attention to your manners. You're talking to the most fashionable hero in the nation. 3 consecutive years of People's Choice voting. Appreciated, but the boys just bark." Best Jeanist turned back to Bakugo and said, "The public's perception told lawmakers how to draw the line between heroes and villains," with a smirk hidden by his costume and a raised hand to calm his fervent employee. The court of public opinion even overtook the vigilantes who worked in gray areas. What lesson does this history lesson teach us, then? That this is a waste of time. You are a bastard. Jeanist laughed again. "It's funny. Appearance matters," he said, reaching into a pocket and taking out a new comb. "No, the answer I'm looking for is much simpler. Please don't let this be a sign of things to come." Yaoyorozu spent well over an hour getting ready for a photo shoot on their first day of the internship, sweating under her new mentor's antics. Itsuka Kendo, to her left, appeared to be going through a similar amount of distress, albeit somewhat more casually, judging by her ashamed smile, saying, Well, at least we can say our internship is unique." Uwabami grinned and gave a final kiss, saying, "That's great. One of the most crucial things to keep up when you're a pro like me is your appearance. It instills in everyone the sense of wonder they adore in their heroes. It looks like I have nothing else to do for a while." Momo broke out in a cold sweat when Uwabami decided to try combing her hair in a different direction, much to the dismay of her snakes. Perhaps I should try to pick up on her confidence. "Sir, Izuku Midoriya reporting for the internship," Izuku said after cleaning himself up and putting his uniform in order. He bowed to the elderly hero on the stoop and received a dry laugh. "Thank you for having me." "Hey," Gran Torino said, gesturing the boy inside, "you've got manners down. Go ahead and show me what you have." Izuku nodded, hurried into the rundown apartment, threw his blazer onto a musty chair, and rolled up his sleeves. Sharingan. As the 3 tomos whirled out of his pupils, his eyes took on the recognizable red glow. One for all. Full Cowling. His irises were rimmed in an emerald sheen, and his body began to glow faintly, with green lightning crackling around his silhouette. The retired professional said, locking his door after giving the boy a close examination. "You turn them on simultaneously. Improved physicality and perception. Isn't that a lethal combination?" Izuku grinned and nodded. "Yes, sir, not true." Then Izuku felt a kick to the back of his head, then to his arm, and then to his chest again. Gran Torino disappeared in an instant, replaced by dozens of wind trails that skirted the living room walls, floor, and ceiling. Objects flew, along with some drywall, and even the appliances were not spared from the display of power, if the crumpling microwave was any indication. "Oh," he flinched back, landing on the ground with aches already starting to appear all over his body. "Are you exhausted already?" Gran Torino grinned as a gust of wind blew from his feet, propelling him even higher than before. "Come on, kid, the warm-up is over." He's so much faster than Iida that the Sharingan can hardly keep him in sight, and his speed makes it difficult for me to move, so if I want to counterattack, I have to study his movements. Izuku began to see Torino's pattern through the bruises and bumps, the projected roots showing up as lines in the environment like some kind of augmented reality game, similar to Whack-A-Mole, but, OWW, it's from inside the machine. His thrashing gradually became more focused and less haphazard, ranging from wildly misfiring his grabs and jabs at the elderly speedster to missing him by a quarter of a second to barely brushing the hero's costume. Gran Torino's face lit up with the tiniest of smirks as he flew around the apartment, launching attacks at the newcomer from every angle imaginable. He's learning, and the more he sees, the more he can move, so in no time he should be able to anticipate my attacks and come up with a good counter. Alright, after this blow, Izuku flinched as another kick struck his upper arm. He will run to the couch and leap at me. He will be within my reach for a short while, which implies. Torino's jump caused the couch to suddenly bounce back, and Izuku jumped forward just in time, his fist cocked back for a Detroit smash. I adore these peculiarities. Unfortunately for him, he made a poorly prepared punch that barely scraped the hero's cheek due to poor timing and force of the jump. These quirks annoy me. Izuku moaned as both of his quirks involuntarily deactivated as he rubbed his side from that final blow. But Torino sneered and abruptly accelerated, flipping in midair and kicking both legs into Izuku's side, using the jets on his boots to amplify the force and knock the student into the collapsing wall, cracking both the foundation and his ribs. He could go even faster? This is the world of pros. That's the issue, huh? That was pathetic. By the time you got to me, you had hardly even begun winding up. He cleaned himself of paint chips and scowled at the tiny tears in his dress shirt, saying, "Sorry, my timing's been off since my Sharingan matured or evolved. It basically improved." He probably should have asked to change first because, like, events used to play pretty slow already, but now it feels around twice as slow. I can then more accurately and earlier predict the movements of my opponents. So you get an awakening and yet you're worse off than before? Guffawed Gran Torino. That's encouraging, hee. Well, that's not the whole story. Since my movement functions on a different scale than what I perceive, it is extremely disorienting for me to have the Sharingan suddenly gain more power after becoming accustomed to it over the past year, especially with One for All. It's actually much easier to come up with strategies now that my insight has grown, but I'm obviously stuck on the old speed and not following through properly, so more out of shock than genuine pain, he rubbed the top of his head. The old man sat down at the table and angrily tossed his cane aside, saying, "That muttering might be the single most annoying thing I've ever heard, and I've had to listen to Toshinori practice catchphrases." He then motioned for his student to follow. "I apologize." Izuku complied, saying, "It's a force of habit, but I was hoping you could teach me how to increase the amount of One for All I can handle so I'd make up for this problem. And, of course, simply approaching All Might's level in general. So, that's your weekly objective? Have you mastered One for All to the point where you can solve issues by brute force?" Well, that's not exactly how I'd put it, BU. Then provide more details. I'm anticipating more than passionate speeches because I've heard you're intelligent. Izuku clutched his knees and glanced at his lap. "I lost at the sports festival," he said, "not because of my quirk, either. I simply couldn't even think about what was important because I was so focused on forcing Todoroki to use his left side." "What is that, too?" Gran Torino gazed at the boy with his hands crossed. "What are you saying? I let All Might down by failing to meet his expectations. I lost the finals because I hurt myself." "So, sure, hurting yourself was a dumb move, but what's the big deal if you don't live up to his expectations?" Torino grinned. "What do you hope to achieve?" "Of course it's a big deal," Izuku said as he jumped to his feet. He was interrupted by the tip of Gran Torino's cane on his mouth. Gross. All Might trusted me with this power so that I could become his successor and the next symbol of P. Would you give up attempting to emulate All Might?" Before Izuku collapsed in his chair, there was a tense silence. Stop trying to be like him." "To not be like him was not what I said, but you're setting yourself up for failure by attempting to be him. I am aware that your generation, particularly a recluse like you who was too narrow-minded to recognize his quirk, was practically raised to worship him. The Dr. Tall, but being All Might is not the same as being a hero. His ability to win and save lives is his trademark, but this is because he consciously seeks to inspire others. He is the result of growing up in an uncertain era when there were more villains than heroes and people actively sought a beacon to cling to. His actions and story can inspire you, but trying to emulate him when you're so different is just setting yourself up for failure. Hell, I bet you only signed on to intern with me because you found out I taught him." Gran Torino went on, taking Izuku's transfixed silence as confirmation. "You know, his predecessors are all very different people from each other. Sure, they were all true heroes, but they had different motivations behind their actions and applications for their power, aside from the common goal, of course." "Common goal? Well, Toshinori, you haven't really told him anything." "That's a story for your mentor to tell, but the point is that all of them were totally different people. Hell, the only thing All Might really has in common with his mentor is that annoying smile. Even their fighting styles are distinct." Torino pointed his cane at Izuku's chest. "But not you. You put him on such a pedestal that you're even using One for All exactly like him. For all intents and purposes, you treat it like you were quirkless." "Like him? I don't understand, isn't it a power-up emitter type coup?" "Wrong." Gran Torino snarled, slamming his foot into Midoriya's face once more. "One for All isn't a power quirk, it's power, plain and simple. For All Might, sure he had nothing to work with, but you do. So use that big brain of yours." Stunned and somewhat perplexed, the teenager turned away. "That's enough for now. I'm going to grab some food. See if you can clean up." Torino sighed and got up, grabbing his cane. Izuku silently complied as his mentor departed the apartment. Gran Torino pondered as he made his way to the grocery store. I'm sorry, kid, but telling you won't make you better. Take my word for it. Before you can consider what you should be, you must accept who you are. However, he rubbed the spot on his cheek where Izuku had just barely hit him. It's a good place to start. Stain leaned against the bar and snarled, You want me to join the League of Villains, is that it? Idly scratching his neck, Tamura Shigaraki said, That's the idea. You're about as renegade as they come. I need that in my party. For what? Besides attempted child murder, what are you after? Stain asked, narrowing his eyes. Kill All Might. Then maybe some other people I hate, Shigaraki said with a smile behind his hand mask. Hey, you want my help and yet, hey, you're what I hate most, Stain said, breaking the eerie silence with a burst of grating laughter that must have sent all the birds in the neighborhood into a frenzy. You want to try that again? Shigaraki asked, tilting his head and twitching his fingers more frantically. Before he knew it, the young villain was flung to the ground, his barstool clattering away as Stain's studded boot pulled back. Before charging forward with his hand extended toward the hero killer's face, Shigaraki paused to gather his thoughts. However, as he connected a punishing hook, the hero killer appeared to disappear, sending the former crashing to the ground. Master, should I intervene? Kurogiri asked, tensing at the sight and turning to the screen to his right. If there was a reply, it was inaudible because Stain quickly grabbed the teleporter's metal brace and said, Sleep. He then slammed his katana's pommel into the neck guard with such force that the bar rang shrilly as Kurogiri collapsed limp. However, Stain noticed a blur of movement in his surroundings, indicating that the fight was far from over. Instinctively, he let go of the katana and jumped back, avoiding a swipe from Shigaraki, whose temple was bleeding quite a bit from the previous blow that also knocked his mask loose. As best he could, Shigaraki flicked the blood away, causing the mask to come off. Shigaraki clutched the abandoned katana with both hands, gritting his teeth angrily, and smiled as his decay spread across the serrated blade. Ha ha ha, that hurt, you know. Stain pointed to the gleaming red lines running down Shigaraki's lower jaw and said, Probably not as bad as that. Tamura said, courtesy of some Ua brat. Nobody wants to play healer so, as he ran a finger over the burn. Then this is really going to suck. 2 knives plunged into the young adult's shoulders right away, and then he was side-kicked in the chest, causing him to reel and cough on the ground, unable to move his arms without experiencing excruciating pain. I could kill you now, but for scum like you, heroes and villains who throw themselves around without aim or purpose, I have something special, Shigaraki said as Stain quickly appeared, knelt down, and withdrew the left knife to press it against his opponent's throat. Shigaraki struggled to move, his rage growing stronger and stronger, until he met Stain's eyes and recalled the exact same expression of rage, resolve, and self-righteousness that he had seen in that Ua scoundrel. I mean, those eyes. Shigaraki let out another roar and willed his left hand to seize Stain's forearm, causing some of the bandages to fall off and the skin underneath to crack. After hissing, the hero killer cracked the younger man's head into the hardwood with his other fist. Stain got to his feet and started to bandage the wound with extra bandages before the sound of clapping refocused him into combat mode. Oddly enough, though, the sound was coming from the same television that Kurogiri had previously called. Then there was a chuckle, and Stain felt compelled to run by every instinct and fiber in his body. Well done. Efficient. I'd expect nothing less from someone of your abilities. With caution, Stain stepped back and raised another blade to the screen, asking, Who are you? What would you know of my abilities? Oh, I've been paying special attention to you for a long time. I'm particularly fond of your career as Stendhal, though I also enjoyed your lobbying. The blue static briefly gave way, revealing an obscured outline that vaguely resembled a human form, but it was twisted and twisted beyond recognition. Who are you? That's a story we don't have time for, but needless to say, I'd greatly appreciate it if you could spare my young pupil's life. At least until you hear him out. The hero killer raised his blade and took a step back, ready to swing down, but he stopped on something unexpected. There's nothing to listen to. He's a child throwing a tantrum, treating society like a game. He has no plan, no ideology, no conviction. He's a stain that I need to remove, she said. What? Yes, that hand from before. After kicking away, he barely managed to get his arms out of Shigaraki's grasp. At least he's got spirit. Shigaraki snarled, removing the severed hand from the ground and putting it back on his face. Not that one. I'll kill you if you do that again. Even though it wasn't as terrifying as whatever master was watching them from that screen, Stain shuddered at the contempt in his voice. You have a weird fixation on my convictions. Thing is, I don't have any. I just want to destroy the symbol of peace in the society that let him get so big while the rest of us got smaller and smaller. I just want to turn them all to dust, Shigaraki said with a broad smile that showed the corners of his mouth peeking out from behind his mask. The cathode ray tube's hum echoed in the background as the bar fell silent. Before putting his weapon away and gathering the dead, Stain snarled, our goals aren't the same at all. But we both want to destroy the society we live in. That'll be enough for now. Go to hell. What happened to hating me, huh? Shigaraki grunted and yanked the other blade from his shoulder, flinging it to the ground while flexing his fingers. So much for conviction. Before approaching the fallen Kurogiri behind the bar, Stain picked up the discarded knife. That was to make you reveal your true colors. Death has a way of making intentions clear. He turned back to Shigaraki and said, there's a spark of conviction in you, and once I see it grow, I'll decide what to do about you. For now, just send me back to Hosu. Prodding Kurogiri, he leaned over his body and said, wake up. The black cloud came to life almost instantly, and the words, what? What happened? Tamura, are you hurt? No shit. Heh. Kurogiri, please send Stain back. We'll contact him when we're ready to move. He opened a warp gate and let the assassin pass through, saying, sure. That quirk, what was it? I couldn't move or talk, and he hardly did anything. With an exasperated sigh, Shigaraki said, great, now this is going to be a whole thing. Might as well stitch myself up. He left his stunned associate behind and entered the bar through the back door. Do me a favor and take care of those wounds for him. He's liable to make things worse. Kurogiri. Sorry, master. Just a little shaken after that encounter, the smoke man said, bringing himself back to earth. The man behind the screen chuckled and said, I can't say I blame you. He's got a powerful ability on his hands. You know it, then? Kurogiri asked, tilting his head. Of course. For that matter, so do you. It wasn't as powerful, but I'm guessing Tamura doesn't care about that detail. Hey, he probably hated Stain the second he saw him. I do? Where I don't like repeating myself. Go to Tamura, now. Kurogiri walked after the latter's apprentice and bowed to the monitor, saying, why yes, of course. Sorry, master. I should hire some extra staff. It's always a special event when one of my children comes home. That evening Gran Torino retired to his bed after a quiet dinner of uncooked instant noodles and an internet search for a new microwave, leaving an extremely alert and frazzled Izuku to ponder on his own. Izuku rubbed his sore ribs and thought, hey, I kinda get why All Might was so scared of him. He definitely gives it to you straight. I can't imitate All Might. I have no sense of self. Act like I'm quirkless. He rubbed his head in exasperation and said, but what can I do? I feel like the answer's so obvious but I'm just not getting it. Alright, consider Izuku. Put your large brain to use. At that moment, he took out his notebook and started taking notes. Let's make a list of Gran Torino's remarks. 1. Power is all that one for all is. 2. Make use of what I have. 3. I am unable to imitate someone who is not like me. This is terribly useless. How will this help me match one for all with the Sharingan? Or get used to a higher percentage? Izuku moaned as he reclined on the musty couch. Gran Torino's words, your approach to one for all is exactly like his and it's terrible, replayed in Izuku's mind. He turned back to his notes from the beginning of the year and said, wait, so I should try changing how I use one for all. Egg in the microwave, glass filled with water, these are all analogies. Izuku turned page after page until he said, here we go. Clench your buttocks and yell smash. As a teacher, Gran Torino may have been correct about All Might. He's probably the only person I know with a similar situation to mine. His left and right sides are practically separate quirks, but they counteract each other, so using them in tandem allows him to avoid the adverse side effects of either. Izuku opened Todoroki's profile while flipping through his notebook. However, I've been using the Sharingan and one for all simultaneously for months. How can I get them to cooperate? To ask Todoroki to use both sides simultaneously would be absurd. Two disparate things cannot be made to cooperate. He spent some time thinking about the issue, even going through the old notebooks he had brought. Izuku didn't come upon anything helpful until he was halfway through Hero Analysis for the Future. Number 4, he read aloud, carefully interpreting his handwriting from childhood. Quirks are, in reality, no different than a limb or a muscle. Raymond R. the Detenirot Company's Yatsubashi. When we learned that I had the Sharingan during the slime incident, I think I said something along these lines to All Might. I mentioned that it was most likely triggered by reflex. Oh shit. Naturally, for everyone else, flexing their arm is the same as using their quirk. However, because I received them so late, I've been treating Sharingan and One for All more like switches that can be turned on and off than like extensions of who I am. Setting aside his journals, Izuku warmed up his body for the task at hand by cracking his knuckles. Those switches were used for various purposes. He stepped out into the hot June air after silently opening the back door, which was remarkable given that the hinges had enough rust on them to make a sword. However, adaptation is now the only viable course of action. A tall man in a black trench coat sat in a dirty alley close to Roppongi, his steely yellow eyes and long, disheveled red hair barely illuminated by the overwhelming glow of Might Tower. He found some meat in the trash and chewed on it idly, thinking it was jerky or perhaps an old piece of dried fish. Then he lifted his fist just in time to seize the person who was approaching him from behind and drag them to the ground, saying, "You'll have to do better than that." Ken Ude simply laughed, seemingly unconcerned with the way his pink hair absorbed the stench and filth from the alleyway floor. "Hey, sorry Kaseki, but it's always worth a shot." Kaseki grinned as he let go of his friend, enabling him to sit normally and remove the month-old rainwater from his hair. "Anyway, what did you want?" "We received a call regarding the job," Ken said, holding up an old flip phone. "Claimed to have wanted to talk to you." Kaseki stood up and accepted the phone without saying anything. "They called us?" "Yup." He held the green phone button to his ear and pressed it twice, saying, A moment later, a voice he recognized came over the line. "Ah, Mr. Higane. I was hoping you would give me a call back soon, but this is very fast. I value your professionalism." "Well, you're paying me." Kaseki scratched his chin, which was unshaven, the rough, unruly skin peeling off. "What do you need?" "Ah, you see, I was hoping we could make an alteration to our arrangement." Kaseki clenched his fist and said, "Is this a sign that you're out?" Ken silently leaned his head against the brick wall and moaned from behind. "Figures. Hey, actually, quite the opposite. I would also like your assistance with another job." After hearing no response, Kaseki Higane said, "Of course, you will be handsomely compensated for both the difficulty of the task and the short notice." This silence was caused more by shock and surprise than anything else. "How little notice? In 2 nights, I'll need you in Hosu City. I would like you to assist in providing entertainment for an event that some of my associates are hosting. Citizen targets are messy, tisk. It's one thing on an island, but we're talking about Tokyo here. I'll give you all the transportation you require to enter and exit securely. Furthermore, you don't have to cause any harm. Sending a message, in whatever form it may take, is the goal. I'll let you use your professional judgment." "What if I say no? Then I'll have to kill you." He said it in a straightforward manner that left no opportunity for misunderstanding or doubt, and Kaseki fully believed him. "Hey, fair enough. Don't be concerned. You and your team will receive more than just monetary compensation. I'll add to our previous transaction as well. I have no doubt that a man like you will find that appealing." With a smile so broad that half the local population shuddered, Kaseki said, "Sounds like a deal." The morning after, Sorihiko stretched out on his old mattress and reached for his cane, looking down to see the futon folded neatly against the wall, almost exactly where he had left it for the intern, and he was also noticeably missing Midoriya, though the faint murmuring from downstairs gave him a clear indication of where he was. Gran Torino said, "At least he has a solid work ethic. He's got a decent head on his shoulders, so hopefully he's made some progress." He adjusted the mask he slept in to properly cover his face. He saw his newest student in the fetal position, frantically muttering whatever twisted scripture he had in those journals, and all hope was swiftly dashed as he descended the stairs. His mind is a mess. "Hey, newbie." "Oh, Gran Torino," Izuku said, waking up from his reverie and looking up from his notebooks. "Good morning," he said in a quiet, hoarse voice that so effectively conveyed his weariness that the elderly man asked why he needed those eye bags. "What's wrong with you? Christ. Well, I was thinking a lot and then I thought I had a breakthrough with the quirks, but I was wrong, and by the time I realized that, it was morning." He's still not understanding quirks. "All right, let me see what you got there." Gran Torino grabbed the journal from him and quickly read through the notes. "Well, at least you're trying," he said. "Even though your mentor had a lot of them, his main advantages were strength and speed. Adapting to your power has been a change, I know, but more than anything else, it's about changing your perspective. You mentioned that one for all was used in various ways by All Might's forerunners. By that, what did you mean? Hey, they had different powers, didn't they? Sighed Gran Torino. Why would a person with flying skills use one for all like a person without? I can't emulate someone different from me. He had said that earlier, but I thought that Midoriya was interrupted by the doorbell. It's most likely the latest microwave. We'll have breakfast after you arrange that for me. They had different powers. I've been using one for all like I'm quirkless. He signed for the package, hurriedly unpacked, and plugged in the new appliance before tossing some taiyaki on a plate and setting it to cook while reflecting on Gran Torino's words. Use what I have, oh. So I need to use one for all to enhance the Sharingan. Izuku pounded his fist into his palm like a gavel. One for all's previous users must have had peculiarities of their own. They would therefore have possessed skills beyond the physical improvement that one for all could provide. While his taiyaki heated, Gran Torino drummed and fidgeted, but he smiled mischievously and said, "Almost there, kid. Just need a little push." Izuku put the hot plate down on the table after the microwave dinged. But how can I use one for all like that? It's not as easy as imagining it, and even if I could, wouldn't improving the Sharingan only make my issue worse? Despite my frustrations, it's preferable to be more in sync rather than more powerful. Oh, with disdain, Torino spat out a portion of his taiyaki and dropped the steaming piece. You didn't use red bean paste to pump it? What? Biting into one, Izuku said, it wasn't filled in. It's actually quite good, but... All right. It's repulsive. This is simply dough. Take the red bean paste out of the refrigerator. Right on. Taking a bottle of the maroon filling, Izuku began squirting some on the side, resembling a dip. You savage, what are you doing? With a start, he leapt back, what? Torino waved the bottle angrily, saying, you must pump it in. If it's not filled, it's not taiyaki, it's just sour jam on bread. I think it would taste fine wit. No, Izuku grimaced and said, they're not fit for separate consumption. To make something edible, you must combine them. As demonstration, Torino stabbed a fish pastry with the bottle and squeezed in paste until it was dripping out the sides. See? Try it. Izuku took it with trepidation, biting into the pastry and raising his eyebrows in surprise. Oh, it's better. One for all is just power. Most people have a single muscle that makes up their quirks, but Todoroki's hot and cold are like an antagonistic pair that counter each other but come together to form an arm or a shoulder. Quirks are like limbs. Mine aren't separate, they're two halves of a whole. However, one for all and the Sharingan aren't quirks in and of themselves. Rather, they're like two muscles joining forces to create a group that is far superior to either one alone. Gran Torino, I'm the taiyaki. Izuku proudly held up the pastry he had taken from the floor. Go get some sleep, kid. And no, take a look. Izuku clenched his fists and widened his stance. I had to think differently because it was never about combining the two. They shouldn't have been split apart. Now that the Sharingan and one for all are linked, I must think of them as such. Izuku's body started to glow normally as green lightning arced across it, but his eyes glowed and then roared to life with a gleam that was almost blinding. Torino shielded his eyes and grinned, now I have something to work with. It's slower than before, but if I increase my output, the lightning picks up a bit of speed. It gets faster. If I take it down a notch, the lightning subsided, leaving only a faint aura around the teenager. The glow dimmed slightly, revealing two luminous jade eyes with 3 tomo each, revolving around his pupil rapidly like planets to a sun. My true peculiarity is this. Sharingan. True Cowling. Try this on for size, Gran Torino said, aiming his heel at Midoriya's face and swinging in a wide berth as he zipped around his house, furniture skidding across the broken tile from the recoil of his jumps. Izuku shifted his head slightly to the left and bowed his knees just before the kick was about to land, allowing the blow to barely touch his fluffy hair. He instantly swung around and tried to seize his opponent's leg, but the latter quickly took off. Torino smiled at the boy and said, almost 2 minutes left, before launching himself into another crater on his wall. This had been the case since the morning before, as Torino's sadism and Izuku's insatiable ambition to see how good true Cowling was drove the two to spar match after sparring match. Naturally, the mentor was also able to critique his students' newly acquired skills through repeated practice. Compared to the festival, his movements are much more coordinated. In addition, he is acting more aggressively and efficiently and has a faster reaction time. This looks like a true fighting style. He hasn't worked out the kinks yet, though, because Torino scowled when he saw Izuku halt in the middle of a move, ultimately costing him a punch to the stomach. Gran Torino made the decision to enjoy himself as the timer was about to expire. He accelerated and kicked Midoriya twice in quick succession, breaking the boy out of his true cowling. "Come on, you need to land a solid hit on me for it to count," he said. "What a waste." Izuku came up with a plan in a flash and jumped behind the couch. Gran Torino gave a grin. So simple. With the intention of slamming the sofa, and thus Midoriya, into the exposed brick behind it, he leapt off the opposite wall and headed directly for it. Unfortunately for him, a smiling Midoriya re-established true cowling and swung the couch like a giant baseball bat, causing it to suddenly lift off the ground. "You now try this on to see how it fits." But the pro hero changed course in midair and blasted into his student's side after first hitting the ceiling and then the wall behind Midoriya. The timer sounded as he finished his combo, drowning out his student's agonized scream. "I'm sorry, kid, but whoa," is another victory. Midoriya's aura brightened just as the attack touched down. Gran Torino was thrown across the room and struck the wall with a strong and painful force after feeling a tug on his cape. He exclaimed, "Ah," as the wind knocked him unconscious. Sorry. I don't know what happened there. That last hit surprised me, and I wasn't thinking and Izuku said, clutching his side as he ran to the elderly man. He fell silent when his opponent raised a hand. "I haven't been hit like that in a while." "What was that?" Gran Torino said, panting heavily, wiping some spittle from his mouth and carefully massaging his back. "I really don't know. I didn't mean to do anything, it just sorta happened. It was like my body moved, before I could think." Izuku shrugged after examining himself. Heard that before. Gran Torino thought, maybe your body is trying to preemptively respond to the stimuli you pick up with those eyes of yours. React as you perceive instead of stopping to think in between. Gran Torino cracked his back and said, maybe your body is trying to preemptively respond to the stimuli you pick up with those eyes of yours. It's no wonder that his reaction time improved so much in comparison to the rest of us. Izuku held his head where Gran Torino had just rapped him with his cane and said, I did notice that true cowling makes me feel kinda twitchy. Like sometimes I have to keep myself from moving out, while glancing at his hands. Why would you do that? Stop second-guessing yourself and just let your body move, trust your instincts. Izuku pictured his fellow deputy representative and said, hey, a friend of mine actually told me that recently. Well, since she assisted me in creating full cowl and everything, I should probably tell her about this. Well, it's good advice, Gran Torino gasped. Seriously, you can't get in your own way like that. Although, based on that nosebleed, I'm guessing there's some downside to acting on pure instinct. My head hurts a little too. Izuku arched an eyebrow before wiping his nose. His eyes widened at the red liquid that returned to his hand. What? How'd that happen? He asked. You said your current limit's 5%, right? Izuku leaned his head back and pinched his nostrils, asking, why yeah? On that last hit, you started glowing more than normal. You think you accidentally used more of one for all than you can handle? Izuku paused for a moment. I guess it's possible. I used to be able to focus totally on just controlling my output, but now I'm also trying to manage all the jerky movements and the problem of maintaining true cowling itself. And I'm also having trouble concentrating on strategizing since so much of my focus is on upkeep. Torino took a seat and let out a loud S. So your quirk works best when you don't think, which itself requires conscious effort since you have, for better and for worse, the most hyperactive brain in the world. Of course, you could closely manage the input and avoid going over your limit while being able to come up with intricate plans, but then you're not fighting at your best. I've got it. Yeah? Izuku trembled with anticipation. Your life is way too complicated? Exaggeratedly disappointed, he collapsed. What else was I expecting? Chuckling, Gran Torino took a step back. Well, there's nothing to be done about that. You've only been at this a day and a half or so and your only fighting experience is against an old coot. Maybe if you chose to intern with a hero with a more diverse combat range, you could get better practice in. You don't have to remind me. You can't expect an amputee to use a prosthetic right away. You have to persevere and give yourself time. After a while, you become more accustomed to handling it. But it's like most things. Consistent and rigorous training over extended periods of time. Furthermore, this is already a big improvement over when you first arrived. Since One for All already increases perception to match your improved skills, your Sharingan would have eventually lost its significance. You have virtually limitless combat potential as long as you continue to train. That was really excellent, well-considered advice, wow. That's why we're using Phase 2 of the internship to expedite the process. We're going to battle some bad guys, so put on your supersuit. Wait, what? As he emerged from the black mist, Tamura Shigaraki grimaced at the sight and smell of the city. Although he had spent a large portion of his childhood in filthy, infested apartments and waste-filled alleyways, there was something about the urban jungle that always made him hate it. Perhaps it was the dense crowds of people going about their daily lives that bothered him so much, or perhaps it was the fact that so many of them were happy, seemingly content to live in the society that so troubled his thoughts, but he reminded himself that his brief disgust was insignificant. They would all die soon enough, after all. So, is this Hosu? Not quiet for a hub world. The hero killer rolled his shoulders and neck in front of him in Kurogiri, saying, "This city is the most recent to undergo reform. I'll be that much closer to a just society by the time my work is done. But first, I need to tear the old one down," he said, thumbing his new sword in its recently cleaned auxiliary blades. Stain turned to his allies and said, "You stated that you wished to overthrow the current order. Let this serve as a reminder to you. Our work is never done until those self-centered jerks are reduced to a bloodstain on my boot and the populace awakens to the cancer that afflicts them." He then leapt from the roof and started hunting. Shigaraki scratched his neck in frustration and boredom more than anything else, saying, what a pompous prick. He's like an essential NPC that doesn't do anything but has 2 lines of dialogue on repeat. Kurogiri answered, "He's not at all trivial, but I can't comment on your simile. In addition to his psychological impact on the public, he has been shown to statistically reduce petty crime wherever he goes. Additionally, it has already been demonstrated that a rise in hero activity, as measured by the quantity and average of cases resolved, is typically associated with a decline in crime. First of all, nice info dump, spat Tamura. Second, you just validated what I said. Someone who improves heroes is not needed. When I had the chance, I should have just killed him. I'll have to make do with my mobs now." 3 massive, malformed figures emerged from a giant portal at the same time. The largest was completely black with red scars and had no skull. His entire head was made up of a jaw and exposed brain. The middle-sized one was yellow, with a gas mask on his mouth and a set of enormous wings on his back. The smallest was only marginally bigger than a man of All Might's size, but his eyes, of which he had 4, more than made up for his lack of stature. "Go have fun, you 3. Heroes are civilians, it makes no difference, perhaps not pets. Okay, hero killer, let's have a little competition. Who can have the best Zerg rush?" Shigaraki smiled behind his father's hand as his minions swooped down into the cityscape. "Otherwise, feel free to destroy anything you want." All Kaseki said was, "Show up at night. It's Japan, night starts at 5 o'clock." As he stood atop a water tower, idly swinging his feet off the edge. "Hello, Kaseki. I packed some snacks." Holding up a bag from a convenience store, Ken called from the roof below. Higane tapped the water tower with a smile on his face and a glow coming from his fingertips. The walls of the enormous metal cylinder twisted under his pressure, forming a set of rungs that resembled a unibody ladder. "You got any booze?" "I don't think the advance payment would cover that," Ube said, laughing as he hoisted himself up and over onto the rounded metal dome. "Perhaps after the job is done, we can go to a bar and do it right." Tisk. Kaseki scowled and tapped the tower once more, smoothing out the leg. "I hate being broke." Ken gave his friend a can of tea and exclaimed, "Look at the bright side, you've never been rich." "How is that a bright side?" Kaseki asked, cracking the lid and taking a deep drink. "Perhaps you would also detest that. You would then be let down." "I doubt it. You never know, it's best to continue doing what you do." "So we should continue to provide jobs for Yakuza and thugs?" Higane nibbled on a mochi with strawberries. "I would rather think of it as building strong working relationships between coworkers and peers. In addition, the new guys are superior to the others. What do I call that, you know?" "No, but you're gonna tell me rigor, upward mobility," Ube said, waving his hands so much that his drink spilled everywhere from the can. "You and I are living the dream. I'm pretty sure that's what you said when we jacked that Detnirok truck. Was that not a dream come true?" All the support items exploded. "While we were leaving it, that is the kind of thing that only occurs in movies. Except it was in my garage. Recall the article one forwarded to you regarding the perils of materialism? What would you do without me, really? Do you own a house? It was an abandoned warehouse and you know it?" The sound of screaming and running filled the air almost immediately, and the sirens soon followed. The 2 old friends were still joking when an explosion exploded a few blocks away, sending a shockwave that made their ears ring. "What the devil was that?" Ken placed his hands cautiously on his head. The client said there'd be a signal, Higane said, tapping the tower until the metal walls folded back into shallow rungs. He might be sending it that way. Am I just supposed to ignore that you called some mob boss a client? Ken snickered, nursing his ears still. When did you become so irate? As he descended his improvised ladder, Kaseki turned to face his friend and said, aside from the fact that his guys clearly know mob boss, it's just like you said, Ken. We're moving up in the world. He landed in a perfect crouch and then tapped the water tower to restore its original smoothness. How about me, huh? Unwilling to jump the 20 or so feet straight down, Ube perspired. Without a word, Kaseki gestured to his forearm, then to his temple, and finally to his friend before tapping the roof's concrete to send him hurtling onto the next building's roof and calling forth a pillar from the metallic elements inside. It took a moment for the realization to dawn on Ken. Oh, I see. Instigate widespread chaos and terrorize the populace. Nice. Activating his quirk, he stabbed his right arm through the handles of their snack bag, his left hand twisting into a conical silvery blade, and then he leapt off the tower and thrust his arm into the metal walls, causing a gash in the tower. Whatever resistance they provided was only enough to slow his descent, leaving them defenseless against his attack. A torrent of water poured out of the hole he made in the container, splattering onto the already terrified people below. Hey, now their socks will be soaked. God, I'm bad. Before his friend caused the entire south face of the nearby apartment complex to shear off, he was also feeling pretty proud of himself. Show off, tisk. As he ran through the city, trying to guide people to safety zones and shelter, Manuel gasped, damn it. Why now? Why here? Iida, could you please go ahead and check if anyone needs help moving? As he swerved through the terrified crowd, Iida kept his gear down to preserve his agility and hurriedly looked for anyone who might be hurt, elderly, or otherwise unable. Yes, sir. Manuel, we have someone confined to a wheelchair and a grandparent with their grandchild. Wait, my son is here. Take me the family, then make a U-turn for the wheelchair. Really, I'm only 40. The grandmother objected as Iida lifted her and her child onto his shoulders and charged back at Manuel and the line he was drawing around the threat. After assisting them in getting down, Manuel hurried them back, saying, really, how did this happen so quickly? Is it a gas explosion of some kind? Iida didn't wait to respond because he rushed back for the other victim. Perhaps he is involved in this. He pushed the wheelchair back as quickly as he could, much to the joy of its occupant, and then he turned around to head closer to the location of the previous explosion, saying, I'll go ahead to scout then. Manuel gave his intern a thumbs up as he drove off, but then he instantly felt cold. Why'd I think that was the wrong call? I'll get to the places Manuel told me about. Iida drove the speedster through the city's alleys and corners, looking everywhere for anyone who might need help. He saw a small group of people moving erratically in the distance. They were most likely hurt. Out of the corner of his eye, Iida caught a glimpse of a figure standing in the shadows of an alley, his silhouette barely discernible in the twilight, but he knew instantly who it was. As the city echoed with more explosions and panic, the hero killer sneered, that fool. Does he have to be so ostentatious? Stain grinned as he turned back to his most recent victim, the quivering pro-hero. Native who was holding his bleeding side in one hand and his throat in the other. Even among local heroes, you were likely the weakest in a long time. However, he paused as their gazes met, and Native took a sharp breath as he could from the feeling, saying, it appears that you're not the worst of the group either. Taking his sharpest and strongest knife from his belt with his free hand, Stain said, I'll make this quick. Why you, bastard, Native, his eyes already glazed and red, croaked through the suffocation. But every time with these speed types, momentum is as much a weapon against you as it is to me. Stain saw a flicker of movement on Native's periphery before he could drive the blade through his forehead. With reflex and trained skill, he let go of Native, leapt back, and spun counterclockwise, delivering two back-to-back kicks that sent his attacker flying down the alley and knocked off his white helmet. The newcomer scurried to his feet and gave him a fierce look, saying, you, a dozen blades, a tattered costume, and a red scarf. The hero killer is you. At most, he is in his late teens. What do you want, kid? He gestured to Native, who was tending to his wound and throat, saying, I'm a little busy at the moment. Tenya's body trembled with anger as he gazed at his opponent with daggers. You attacked my brother. You destroyed his life. Why you? I've destroyed a lot of lives. You'll have to be more detailed. A dull ache at the base of Iida's skull followed by a sudden flush and sting in his pupils said, ah. What was that? His peculiarity. He gripped his head and closed his eyes in agony. So Ingenium is your brother, huh? I guess there's a similarity. However, I'm shocked he survived. But you came here with vengeance in your heart, was said, followed by the sound of a sword being unsheathed. I didn't give him enough credit then. You only care about settling the score, he said, jerking his thumb in the direction of the fallen hero. It was never about saving this guy. But since you're young, I'll be kind and say, go. Now. Iida gritted his teeth and took his place, losing all sense of reason. Go? You dare not belittle me. I will hold you accountable in the name of the hero Ingenium because I am the last surviving son of the Iida family. Fire poured from his exhausts as he took off with a roar. You will try. Stain glanced at Native and said, go to bed. The hero leapt into a spinning downward slash as soon as he sagged over, his blade spinning through the air in a brilliant silver arc. Right as he looked up at his target, Iida's face was well acquainted with the hero killer's boot, the spikes tearing into his flesh with painful ease. Iida slid at the last second, skidding under the attack before using his hands to slow down while his feet pivoted, allowing him to line up a perfect reverse axe kick. Oh, before Iida could even register his pain, a series of earth-shattering hooks sent him reeling, blood rapidly pooling from his mouth and nose. Iida yelled and scrambled back, trying to create distance, but Stain sprang forward with explosive speed, grabbed his hair, and threw him headfirst into the alleyway brick. Recipro. Then Iida recalled his brother's broken body lying in the hospital, his haunted expression remaining for hours, the terrified whispers refusing to grant anyone in the room a semblance of peace. These reflexes. This speed. The ferocity. He's definitely inhuman. In the wake of this new variable, Stain felt uncertain and abruptly raised his eyebrow. Burst. Iida's engines roared to life as bright blue flames propelled his legs into the hero killer's side, kicking the assassin into the opposing wall. This is for Tensai. Iida blasted through the brick with ease as he charged forward and planted his foot in the wall. Unfortunately, his target was somewhere else. Your brother also tried that, he said, wasn't effective for him. A sweeping hook kick with the remaining recipro burst was aimed directly at Stain's torso, but it went straight through him. What? Iida turned just in time for an uppercut to catch his chin, and he flailed wildly to avoid falling. Hey, so angry that I'm blind. Stain abruptly materialized to Iida's left, sweeping his smoking and hot legs while driving a sword through his shoulder and into the earth below. It's almost too easy. He made an illusion. Who is he? Tenya screamed in agony, his left arm screaming from the rough-hewn blade. In the background, I hear screams. Rather than confronting me, you could have gone to save them. Hell, you might have even attempted to seize Native and flee. But rather than putting others' needs ahead of your own immature feelings, Stain snarled and slammed his hand against Iida's head, saying, someone like you doesn't deserve the air you breathe. So I'll put a stop to that. They made eye contact. A crushing weight was placed in Iida's chest. How is that? It was 15 minutes before. Gran Torino sighed and tapped his cane lightly against Izuku's leg. You kids are always playing on those damn phones. Look out the window for once and enjoy the scenery. Only another hour or so to Shibuya, he said. Even though he hasn't replied to me in a long time, I said, oh, sorry. One of my friends is in Hosu and since we're passing him, I wanted to send him a quick message. Izuku put his phone in his pocket and rubbed his knees, but his leg guards and gloves didn't help. Regarding that, Gran Torino rubbed his chin and recalled All Might's early multicolored outfits. You know, that costume's pretty plain. I would have thought you'd go for something, I don't know, flashier? He said. Even so, the darker green and black is unquestionably better. Well, my mom actually designed the jumpsuit for me, so I wanted to keep it in line with that. Izuku grinned as he ran his hands over his new suit once more, enjoying the more intricate design and rugged feel. The mask is also a significant improvement. After UJSJ, I got a replacement, but it didn't even function. But are you sure we'll see many villains on patrol? For one, we're getting there so late and wait, also what time are we getting back? Grinning, Gran Torino replied, we'll get back whenever we get back. Worst case scenario, we sleep in the station while we wait for the first train. That won't draw strange attention, but as for the villains, nighttime tends to be the best time for incidents. The big stuff tends to happen during the day, sure. But for agile heroes like us, we can dip around tight alleys and rooftops to find all the skeevy sort that only play in the shadows. The train abruptly braked as a distant explosion sounded, sending Izuku reeling while the more seasoned pro leapt onto his seat with ease. The hell? Please remain seated. The train is making an emergency stop. Please remain said the automated announcer. Many other passengers were sent flying when a giant figure exploded through the side of the train, cutting out the voice. With gray-green skin, 4 wide eyes, and an exposed brain, the figure was tall and lanky. Izuku's blood chilled. Nomu? In Hosu? Although he appears different, that is undoubtedly his cousin or something. The League of Villains has arrived, then. Don't move, kid. Gran Torino acted swiftly, launching himself onto the ceiling and then into the beast, knocking them both through the hole it made with a headbutt. The teenager was too shocked to hear it, but he later recalled 2 important details. First, he technically defeated the Nomu at USJ, even though he did it with a Chidori to end all Chidori. Second, and perhaps more significantly, Nomu was naive, making him vulnerable to his hypnotic powers. Izuku exclaimed, "Everyone, please stay in your seats." As he approached the enormous hole, the Tomo spinning into position in the emerald headlights he dubbed eyes, the green glow of true Cowling enveloping his body. Izuku jumped off the tracks onto the nearest building and skidded to the ground along the wall after spotting the small hero speeding past the enemy on a nearby street. Gran Torino yelled, "I said to wait," and sped around the Nomu, effortlessly dodging its slow, savage swings. "Sorry, but I think I can help," Izuku said in apology, "but this Nomu seems much weaker than the others. He is also slower." All that matters, though, is that he leapt between the Nomu and Gran Torino and met the latter's eyes. He concentrated on the one command, "Stop," as he felt the familiar pressure behind his retina. The Nomu froze at once, his eyes reflecting the Sharingan. Izuku grinned when his hypnosis worked. "The Sharingan is green now. Hey, true Cowling continues to improve. Now stop fighting and stay here." Nomu sagged over, utterly immobile, his arms going limp at his sides. Gran Torino approached his student slowly and patted him on the back, saying, "Well done. Now let's go, huh?" Well done? Sincere commendation? I've missed you so much. The second sentence, "Wait, I get to come with you," made Izuku's heart tighten. Laughing, Gran Torino called out, "Well duh. If you can stop that thing in its tracks, then of course you're coming. Geez, I didn't know you could hypnotize the damn thing. How long have you had that trick?" "And against Kaminari, but I suppose that didn't really work out for me. Like a month or so. I used it on the Nomu at the USJ and managed to get it to back off." "Damn, you really should have picked someone else to intern under. I don't have any tricks for mind control." "You're telling me. But hurry up then. We can't be sure there aren't more like this one, so we need to get a move on. Just thinking about them made my ribs hurt. Oh God, please don't say that." After running past a number of civilians and toward the sounds of sirens and explosions, they finally reached a sort of city square that was crowded with both heroes and fire. Oh, and a gigantic Nomu that looked uncannily like the one that fell into Midoriya's chest. The monster was hit by a flurry of shuriken fired by 2 ninja-like heroes who leapt into the air, but the weapons just bounced off its iron-like skin. The Nomu swung up, roaring, and knocked the heroes aside with a gust of wind. "He's too damn strong," a hero swore off to the side. "Then we charge him together," said another as he began to charge, his bull-like horns ready. Gran Torino yelled, "We're up, kid," and rushed forward, saying, "Clear the way, he can hypnotize it." Izuku followed suit, already focused. "You just need to look them in the eye." The Nomu chose to slam its fists into the ground, sending everyone flying back in a shower of debris, so sadly, it was too little, too late for them all. True Cowling faded as Izuku rolled painfully along the ground. Well, things could have gone more smoothly. As the dust gradually dissipated, the Nomu was no longer visible. "Where'd it go? I can't see," cried a hero wearing a red bandana and a green and white jumpsuit as a big shadow moved behind her. "Behind you," Manuel said, his eyes widening as he hurried to pull her out of danger. Gran Torino sped ahead as quickly as he could. Oh no. At that moment, a red blur erupted and struck the Nomu, causing it to crash past the pros and into a distant building. "Hey, see that Shoto? Let your quirk build and release it in short spurts for particularly explosive speed and power." When Endeavor's enormous frame appeared, Izuku's mouth fell open. The orange flames that erupted from his face and torso were so intense that they overshadowed the nearby fires. And right at the heels of the number 2 hero was Todoroki? Shoto's eyes widened as he turned, asking, "Midoriya, why are you here?" He approached his classmate and helped him up off the ground. "Thanks. We were going to Shibuya, but our train got attacked by another Nomu." He replied, "So that really was a Nomu. I guess the League's here too." After hearing their conversation, one of the pros became alarmed and exclaimed, Wait, there's another one? Izuku said, "Don't worry, we took it down. I can hypnotize them," while frantically waving his hands. Several heroes were knocked back at that moment when the four-eyed Nomu exploded from the side. "Oh, come on. When I turned off true Cowling, did the hypnosis wear off?" "That'll take care of that." Endeavor appeared in a flash, grappling with the smaller Nomu before hurling it into the air and launching a flaming javelin that struck its abdomen. Regretfully, the Nomu tensed up abruptly and launched a similar javelin from its wounds, which detonated when it hit the ground, scattering dust and debris all over the place. Endeavor snarled, "Damn it, it can reflect attacks?" At USJ, Todoroki continued, "The one could regenerate too." Just as expected, the bigger Nomu exploded out of the structure it collided with, launching a direct punch at Endeavor. The latter stomped down with a fiery jet after blocking it with his palm and knocking the former to the ground with his other hand. Endeavor swiftly created a massive fireball and hurled the smaller Nomu at its feet as it landed, sending it flying back with the impact's explosive force. "Whoa, this is the number 2 hero's power up close." When Todoroki remarked, "Hey, isn't that manual?" the hero Iida was studying under, Midoriya's sense of awe was swiftly dashed. Izuku's eyes widened when he thought Todoroki was correct. Wait, so where's Iida? Manuel was also searching wildly, but no. The hero killer was last seen in Hosu, right? Where Iida just decided to go work at? Sweat trickled down Todoroki's temple as he nodded. The League of Villains is attacking right now. You think the hero killer is working with them? I don't really believe in coincidences. Whoa, I don't think I'm much help with your Endeavor here. You want to come with me? Already on the move, Todoroki quickly created a stream of ice with his right foot. Izuku hurried along with his reactivated true Cowling, following closely behind. "Hey! Get back here!" Gran Torino shouted to his intern as he glanced up from his enemies. Endeavor also yelled, "Shodo! Where are you going?" after his son. "Our friend needs our help," was the simultaneous response from the students. "What a damned child!" The four-eyed Nomu's tongue formed a web-like arrangement that prevented Gran Torino from speeding after them. "Oh, that is absolutely repulsive. Honored Elder, I don't know your name, but you should go help any civilians left in the area. Shoto can handle himself." The tongue was boldly grabbed by a large pair of flaming hands, which then pulled it, along with the Nomu, in for a bone-shattering haymaker. Gran Torino drove off with some of the other heroes, while Endeavor grinned broadly as he looked down at his enemies. "Tisk, I'm going to beat that kid into submission." He cracked his knuckles in laughter as the Nomu lunged forward. "The fun starts right here." Goddammit. Of all people, Endeavor just decides to take a stroll through Hosu? And that fucking Ua brat was there too? Shigaraki snarled as he watched the number 2 hero defeat 2 of his Nomu at once. He would be able to identify that green mop of hair anywhere. This is really getting on my nerves. Kurogiri did not attempt to interrupt his master's outburst, so he watched in silence from behind. Endeavor's presence is extremely unlucky, but those students went in Stain's direction. Maybe he'll get rid of them and make Tamura feel better. Shigaraki tensed abruptly and then burst out laughing, saying, "Haha, Kurogiri, I have an idea." "Oh, something about this bothers me. What is it, Tamura Shigaraki?" With his manic smile hidden behind the mask, he turned around and said, How about we bring in an old friend to even the odds a bit?" he asked. Tamura, that's hardly necessary given Tamura flexed his fingers to emphasize, Hey now. Don't go acting all disobedient right before I have my fun. Bring me the boss Nomu. Now. Kurogiri opened another portal without saying a word, and this time a big black Nomu with a long, sharp beak and multiple red scars appeared. Hisiskull was now protected by a transparent case, and the previously destroyed area of his brain showed a bright red splotch. As though testing them out for the first time, which he was in fact, he flaunted new black wings that he extended to their full 20-foot wingspan. Alright Nomu. There's a super strong mini-boss down there. It's time for some redemption. Kill him, and then find the kid from last time and turn him into paste. Nomu croaked, Why yes, Master RRR, and then leapt violently into the air. As he swerved between streets, Todoroki said, So you know where we're going? The hero killer tends to stick to deserted areas with blind corners that facilitate sneak attacks. We just have to search all of the back alleys near the fighting and we'll. Izuku nodded, his eyes quickly searching the area for signs of life. Izuku leapt from the smooth pavement road, bounced fast between the walls of a nearby alley, and then struck the hero killer's skull with a potent haymaker. "Iida," he said, skidding to a stop as his target was launched into the air, then glancing down at his friend's corpse. A short sword that probably reached into the ground impaled Tenya Iida's right shoulder as he lay sprawled out. The helmet he was wearing was probably thrown away somewhere, and his face was bloodied and bruised. Midoriya? And is that Todoroki?" he said, his eyes half-lidded, showing only the whites and a tiny portion of the iris. The latter slid in and began steaming right away, melting his left side as the frost accumulated. "So you did go after the hero killer after all," he said. Izuku glanced at the latter, who had been thrown reeling from the full force cross and was now slowly getting to his feet. Dozens of heroes have been killed and wounded by that man, the world's most dangerous serial killer. "You know, I don't like being disrupted. Especially twice." Stain rubbed the back of his skull and snarled at the newcomers. He simply had to target the blind spot as well. "Twice?" With a sidelong glance, Izuku's stomach dropped upon seeing another native hero. "Oh no. I had hoped to simply grab Iida and flee." "Todoroki, you think you can carry Iida or native?" The heterochromic teen shook his head, looking at the adult and the teen in full body armor, and said, "Unlikely." "Oh no, thus, we must fight. Midoriya, Todoroki, why are you?" Iida grunted through the agony. "We'll save you, don't worry," Izuku said, preparing to battle by activating true Cowling. "Huh? How is that possible?" Stain stiffened on the opposite side of the field. Izuku tilted his head, perplexed. What? Todoroki took a sharp breath behind him and said, "Midoriya, look at Iida's eyes." Izuku walked back carefully, keeping his eyes on Stain the entire time. He gave his friend a quick glance before turning away when his mouth fell open. Normally blue, Iida's eyes now had a red appearance, with 3 black lines forming a shuriken-like outline around the pupil. Iida sighed. "He paralyzed me somehow, but his quirk, it looks just like yours, Midoriya." Izuku's blood ran cold as he stared back at Stain, his mind replaying Recovery Girl's words. "Your quirk is caused by a recurring mutation. It's almost like convergent evolution." He, of all people? The Sharingan belongs to the hero killer? With red eyes that glowed ethereally in the darkness, Stain walked towards his new opponents despite his shocked expression. "This day just keeps getting more interesting. To think I'd meet someone like me." Toshinori Yagi clenched his fists at the image on his television from his small apartment in Musutafu. There was an unprecedented amount of collateral damage, blocks were leveled, and fires extended past the tops of buildings. Fear, which he hadn't experienced in years, was now tearing at his mind like a ferocious animal. The creature he'd seen examining the USJ security camera came back to him. A massive creature capable of withstanding the full force of one for all on its bare skull and strong enough to break bodies like twigs. A creature that might have been as powerful as the most formidable villains he had ever encountered. He had now caught a glimpse of at least 3 more in Hosu. His fingers cautiously brushed over his twisted and knotted wound through the fabric of his shirt as he rubbed his side. Even though Endeavor and other heroes were present, All Might was still being prodded by dread. He walked to his closet and grabbed his well-known blue jumpsuit, sighing with a heavy heart. He hadn't really worn it outside of the sports festival for months. As Nezu intended, All Might was more symbol than hero, save for the occasional villain he stopped on the way to work. The world deserved it. As required by Midoriya. It's desperate times. Pulling the suit over his wiry frame, Toshinori chuckled to himself. Taking it from his coffee table, he opened the window to the alley and quickly dialed the first number on his phone, looking around for any passers-by or onlookers. "How may I direct your call?" said the voice on the other end of his phone. "Put me through, please." Toshinori climbed slowly to the fire escape, shut the window, and leapt down. "Hero Public Safety Commission. This is Mara speaking." His eyes penetrating the darkness of the alley, he landed with a forceful thud and roared, "This is All Might. I'm moving on Hosu." As he released the black, eyeless Nomu's hold on his shoulders, Endeavor let out a wild laugh. Then, he delivered a sweeping uppercut that sent the beast flying and onto its back. But when he saw the different wounds he had caused disappear beneath a new layer of darkened skin, his smile grew darker. "Super regeneration? Guess I'll have to actually try," he said. Roaring, the number 2 hero slammed both hands on the stunned Nomu's face while straddling it. Under its opponent's hold, the Nomu thrashed and screamed, but to no effect. Endeavor's hands began to glow slowly, then quickly accelerated, the orange flames growing brighter until they were glowing white. The stream then became even more concentrated into a star-bright blue beam. This more potent variety caused tiny, jagged streams of azure to jet around the town square as its heat cracked the pavement itself, whereas the original fire rippled across the ground. As swiftly as it had started, it abruptly came to a halt, with Endeavor moving away from the Nomu, who gave a few more twitches and dry cries before becoming motionless and quiet, its head reduced to smoking ash. The brutality and the brightness of the attack made it difficult for Manuel to look directly at the scene from the sidelines, but number two's intention was clear. I was unaware that he was capable of carbonizing cells. Even though I'm only about 200 spots behind, the power differential is enormous. But the battle was far from over, as the smaller four-eyed Nomu, knocked away earlier, ran back to battle and roared for its comrade. In preparation for the charge, Endeavor tensed his body and wiped his brow. It will only reflect it back, so I shouldn't shoot another blast like that at this one. The hero caught the Nomu's web-like tongue with a grace and speed that befitted a creature of his size. However, I might be able to abuse that. Endeavor clothes lined the beast and swiftly grabbed its face, snapping its jaw open with a sickening sound that made many of the other pros feel nauseous. Endeavor was yanking on the tongue, and the Nomu by proxy. Endeavor pushed his arm into the creature's maw and let out a huge, powerful explosion inside, still smiling in spite of his opponent's agonized cries. Anything reflected from inside its own body should simply bounce around its viscera if it is reflecting attacks back at the target. Its body flailing in sheer agony, the Nomu shrieked as smoke billowed from every orifice. But when the Nomu's neck burned through and its head separated from its motionless, horribly charred body, the cries stopped. Endeavor threw the head into the air, disregarding the act's morbidity, and then rained down a barrage of fireballs to obliterate what remained. He wiped his hands and inhaled deeply, grinning at a job well done. After that last attack, my arm feels a little warm. It wasn't helped by that concentrated blast earlier. Endeavor wiped perspiration from his face once more and let the fires on his body cool, becoming a deeper red as they did so. We need to locate Shoto now. To find out if there are any more of these things, I should also work with the sidekicks. Endeavor, look! Exclaimed a pro-hero in sudden panic, pointing up at the sky. His flaming fists were already clenched in anticipation as his gaze shot upward, but there was nothing to see. Only the orange light pollution from the nearby fires and the cloud of smoke from his last attack. Endeavor angrily yelled, "Tisk! Get your head on straight," to the embarrassment of the other hero. Then there was a high-pitched roar that echoed through the city, taking everyone who heard it by surprise. When Endeavor looked up again, he noticed that he was perspiring, not from being too hot. With a boom, a huge creature exploded through the smoke cloud and plummeted to the ground. The force caused a huge dust cloud to form around the newly formed crater, shattering the windows in the town square. The pros could just barely see a huge silhouette in the dust, a figure more than 3 meters tall with what appeared to be at least 6 more wings. Reflexively, Endeavor took a step back and commanded, "All of you, move back. Evacuate all civilians within a 5-block radius." The local heroes and sidekicks complied as he continued to keep his gaze fixed on the shadowy figure. One of those beasts again? Probably. However, its apparent strength and speed of arrival are far superior to even the black one. Besides, it's probably able to fly. I can't let collateral damage be a factor, but I probably won't need to go all out. A third Nomu emerged from the dust, bigger and more muscular than the first two, but still black and scarred. It possessed a sharp beak with multiple pointed teeth in place of a more humanoid jaw. Additionally, it had a transparent covering on its head that resembled a skull. "You, mini-boss?" it asked, pointing a child-sized finger at Endeavor as its wings retracted into its body with an eerie wet sound. Does it speak? Therefore, it's probably also smarter than the other two. Endeavor rushed forward without missing a beat, slamming his fist into the ground where the Nomu was standing. But it was gone in an instant. Hey, SS slow. Endeavor was flung into another blinding blur before the number 2 hero could react. It returned to his side and made a terrifying clicking sound that hardly resembled a giggle. Todoroki hissed, looking back at the hero killer as he applied a thin layer of frost to Iida's wounds. "Midoriya, what's going on? That's your quirk, isn't it?" I don't know. I mean, Recovery Girl said the mechanism behind my quirk was pretty common. Like the red eyes at least showed up in a lot of people. However, Stain's pattern differs from mine, and Izuku shuddered at the sight in front of him. Does that imply that he awakened his more than mine? It seems like the 3 Tomos grew longer. When Todoroki had finished tending to Iida's injuries and was about to approach the fallen native, a knife darted by him, gliding blindingly across his cheek. "Can you undo what he did to them?" Todoroki asked. He glared at his attacker, growling as he held his bleeding wound. To the dismay of the younger pupils, Stain withdrew his hand and said, "I respect you came to save your friend, but I have a responsibility to kill them both. If you get in my way, then the weak will be culled." Looking at Iida, Izuku concentrated on breaking whatever trance Stain had put him in, but to no avail. Izuku considered their predicament, including the growing pain in his head. His hypnosis is more powerful than mine, and his Sharingan might be superior in general. I am unable to determine whether he has a time limit or what it is. I'm already a little worn out from true Cowling. And unlike at USJ, this guy isn't your typical villain or thug. He is an honest murderer. Iida's body barely moved as he rasped, "Midoriya, Todoroki." Tears escaped from the corner of his eyes, still hidden by Stain's pinwheel like Sharingan. Go. This is my fight. It has nothing to do with you. I have to be the one to do this, so please, just go. You have to do this, is that it? Todoroki asked first, breaking the brief silence. Well, I don't know what's going on in your family, but I doubt Ingenium would agree with that. Honestly, Izuku said, shaking himself as though he were attempting to shake off the same fear that had gripped him just a moment before. There's a lot I'm gonna tell you after this, but, he said, smiling tensely, I can't just sit by. My body just moves without me thinking about it. At that, Stain's sly scowl vanished, and he exclaimed, outstanding, with a maniacal smile. Todoroki, pull Native and Iida back. I'll handle him up close. Izuku sprang into action, jumping from wall to wall as an ice slide developed on the ground beneath the two stunned heroes. He then aligned his fist with the hero killer's face. But he could see the muscles in Stain's neck stiffening, as if he were about to tilt away. His arm swung up as though to slam the blunt side of his sword into Izuku, while his sword hand was simultaneously flipping the blade around. Deku changed his strategy, bringing his foot blade back and preparing a devastating roundhouse to Stain's shoulder. However, the perception was altered once more, as Stain grabbed Deku's leg and threw him against a wall while he was getting ready to rotate his hips and take the attack to the chest. Izuku modified his attack once more, and Stain modified his answer once more. They continued to push in and pull back until they both jumped back, exhausted. What the devil? Izuku gasped, his headache from that spar, or lack thereof, getting much worse. So our quirks are similar. Your speed's something else, though. Where's that from? Stain grinned, breathing heavily. Izuku punched the ground without replying, causing a dust and debris cloud to form. I know his approximate position, so if I go around and do a sweeping kick, I'll at least be able to graze him. He planned, waving it with a weak gust of 5%. He kicked his heel where Stain's head should have been as he bounded up and over the cloud, but all he was able to do was knock it away, exposing the hero killer prone on his back with a throwing knife in his hand. The knife cut through Izuku's arm with a smile and a swift flick of the wrist. Stain was already up there, grabbing his shoulder and hurling him against the wall as he whirled away, wincing. Despite gasping as the wind left his body, Izuku managed to grit his teeth enough to push his heel into Stain's side and roll away from a studded kick. Sadly, the hero killer must have foreseen that since a second throwing knife sliced through his calf after falling from the sky. Izuku clutched his leg and cried in agony. From where did that originate? He didn't throw it in front of me. Was it me who missed him throwing too earlier? However, how did he see that much? I can see it in your eyes, but I'll tell you honestly that my quirk isn't much better than yours, at least in terms of prediction. But the way you move and fight, it's clear. The difference between us is experience. Izuku yelled, kip-upped, and launched a barrage of elbows and punches at the hero killer, all of which were parried or avoided. Although it was evident from Stain's flinching face that the younger boy's strength and speed weren't going unnoticed, adding knee strikes and kicks didn't help much either. He eventually succeeded in drawing another knife from the sheaths at his sides, threatened the boy with it, and then lunged forward. Izuku met Stain's blade with one of the throwing knives he had previously used against him. Then, using his free hand, he grabbed Stain's armed one, dropped the throwing knife, grabbed the sword handle from the back sheath, and used both legs to push Stain off his torso and tear the katana free. Izuku marveled at the notched blade as he brandished the weapon. This would be adored by Tokiyami. Stain smirked, snatched up another knife, and used both to swipe at Izuku. Izuku instantly collided with both blades, halting the attack in its tracks, recalling the movies he had watched to learn moves. But the knives locked into the katana's notches, and the hero killer violently twisted the smaller weapons, shattering the blade. Izuku staggered back in bewilderment, letting Stain slit both shoulders with the knives. Tears threatened to fall from the multiple deep cuts on his body as he fell. Stain gasped, not bad, but stay down. You seem worth keeping alive, so I won't kill you, but those wounds are still going to bleed you out if you keep exerting yourself. Midoriya, get down. Izuku instantly obeyed, falling onto his back as Todoroki's extended arm erupted in flames, sending the hero killer reeling backward with multiple new wounds. Izuku jumped back to his ally to catch his breath after standing uncomfortably, saying, "He keeps cutting me and making me flinch to break my line of sight. Well, it doesn't look like he has much in the way of long range, so maybe I can just." Izuku hurried to seize a throwing knife, but as he did, another one concealed behind it sliced through his hand and continued to sail into Todoroki's left shoulder. "Watch out," Izuku said. Izuku, understandably irritated, threw the first knife as hard as he could, staying inside one for all's bounds at Stain. The knife continued to sail into the adjacent alley wall, where it lodged itself so deeply that the masonry cracked, while the hero killer barely avoided it, suffering a nasty cut across the chest. Todoroki formed a few small ice balls with his right hand and handed them off before tending to his injured shoulder. "Well, I guess he has some long-range attacks, but that gives me an idea." Izuku smiled and threw one at Stain, who moved just enough to avoid it. They collided and broke into a painful hailstorm when Izuku threw the next one right for the first at a much faster speed. Izuku hurled the final two with all of his might, sending one crashing into the hero killer's forehead and the other into his ribs as Stain briefly closed his eyes due to the flurry of light. The serial killer tensed his entire body, but oddly did not charge forward, as if the attack had infuriated him more than rendered him helpless. Does he not intend to attack? Oh no, he's just going to turn his head. "Todoroki, don't lock eyes with him, no matter what," Izuku said to his friend in a panic as he shifted to block his view of Stain. Izuku turned around, but it was too late because Stain had already rushed forward and, just inches from the younger hero, grabbed his opponent's face in his hands, locked eyes, and muttered, "Tsukuyomi." As he watched the battle in the middle of town from his perch on an abandoned rooftop, Ken whistled, "Man, look at that shit. Endeavor's flame broiling those things." Kaseki covered his eyes with his hand like a makeshift visor and said, "It's kind of hard to miss. I guess that's what all that money and status gets you. And that quirk, seriously, where does that fire even come from? Makes no goddamn sense. There are hellspawn flying across the city. We're getting paid by some guy that was supposed to be born like 200 years ago. Your hands somehow don't set off a metal detector, and yet you draw the line at shooting fire from thin air." There was a huge explosion in the square, with enough smoke to melt the remaining ice caps and a car-sized fireball shooting skyward. Kaseki gave in and scratched his coarse mullet so hard that some of the odor came loose from the follicles. "You know what? I kind of get it." "Jesus, when was the last time you took a bath?" Ken asked, scowling and pulling his shirt over his nose. "We're homeless. Never heard of a river? I don't intend to go to jail for public indecency. Then how about I send you there for domestic terrorism?" Ken and Kaseki turned to face the new voice, startled, and armed themselves, the latter preparing to touch the ground while the former transformed his forearms into swords. "Huh, you already pose. Looks way dumber than mine," gave Ken a shit-eating smile as he wisecracked. "SSH. Kaseki hissed in response. An elderly man of modest build, wearing a slightly oversized yellow onesie, thick boots, and a cape, stood in front of the two thugs. Additionally, he was hunching over and favoring one leg over the other, as if his own weight were too much for him, which could have been the case. Kaseki knelt down and used his hand to knock the newcomer off the roof, saying, "You don't want any part of this. Leave. Is that outfit a hero? But he's old." "Well, when you put it like that," sighed Gran Torino, who disappeared in a puff of air and then reappeared in a flash, his foot firmly embedded in Ken's sternum. The latter fell off the edge and hit the street below with a choked cry. Kaseki slammed his hand against the cement floor and exclaimed, "Oi, damn it," but was sent reeling after a sweeping kick to the temples. "This guy is incredibly fast." Less than a second later, he felt the back of his coat being pulled over the rest of the rooftop, along with the rest of his body, confirming his thoughts. Ken? You good?" Kaseki said, landing painfully and rising slowly, his arms throbbing horribly and barely supporting his weight. A sidelong hiss went, "I think I broke my ass." His back and ribs ached even more as Kaseki choked out a laugh, unquestionably cracked. Gran Torino rubbed his knees after landing with a gentle puff of air and said, "I'm sorry, but my friend's pupil's pupil put me into kind of a bad mood. But I'll tell you what. Don't do anything stupid from here on out and you might still be able to walk into the police car." What's the alternative?" Ken asked, holding up his hand while still lying flat on the ground. "You'll be carried to the morgue." "Thank you." He lowered his hand. The only painful laugh Kaseki could manage was, "You might be the first guy I've fought in a while who could actually back up all that talk." "I do what I can." With his hands planted behind him, Kaseki called the street railing towards him, the poles turning into spikes. "I can see that. Let me return the favor." Unfortunately for him, Gran Torino only needed to kick them once, almost imperceptibly, to knock them away, and it only took a second to drive Kaseki's head into the ground. "This is Torino. I've got two villains on the street by—" the old hero hissed as he barely avoided a downward slash from a round sword that protruded from Ken's elbow where his arm should have been. He took his phone out of his pocket and dialed for the police. Unfortunately, his phone was completely stabbed through. Gran Torino lunged forward and struck the pink-haired man's chest with another devastating blow, saying, "Damn it, you know how expensive that was? Pension ain't what it used to be, sonny." But this time, with a confident, if strained, smile, the latter was able to grab the smaller hero's costume. Ken slashed at his prisoner with his other hand, which had change. Wincing as the blade grazed his cheek, Torino angled his body, kicked his legs back, and launched himself into a nearby building, dragging Ken with him. He then flipped so that Torino could use him as a launching pad to speed back to the street after the bigger man crashed into it first, releasing his vice grip on the hero suit. "Yes. That one definitely broke my ass." Before he passed out, Ken grinned at his own joke. Why doesn't he have a phone?" "Guess I have to, wait," Gran Torino said, kicking the remnants of his device in a huff before searching through Kaseki's pockets. He halted his speech when he felt the ground tremble and the surrounding buildings tremble so violently that the concrete flaked off their foundations. A seismic event? Of all times, right now. Kaseki slapped his hand into the pavement, creating a brilliant glow, and said, "Sorry, but if the city's going to shit anyway, I might as well just send it." A faint snicker came from beneath him. Pipes exploded out of the street, sludge and water flying in the direction of Gran Torino. As he kicked them away, the old hero sneered, but he jumped when he noticed a flash in his surroundings. The signs and railings from all over the street were also flying in his direction like enormous projectiles. The amount of metal that this guy controls is amazing for a small-time criminal. In an attempt to get the different metal objects to come together, Torino shoots into the air. However, the metal foundations of a dozen buildings tore themselves from the earth at that very moment, forming a series of enormous pillars that rushed towards him, the ground itself disappearing behind a curtain of metal. Goddamn. The attacks were more frequent and swift than Torino had anticipated, sprinting out and about until he was virtually encircled in a cage a few meters above the ground. It took more of his willpower than he wanted to acknowledge to retaliate and escape the assault. Kaseki patted the ground once more, causing the cage and the swift senior inside to whip back and fly off into the distance. "Hey, I guess I win." Endeavor's body moaned and creaked like a rusty gear, and blood trickled down his head as he fought to get himself off the ground. His face felt like paste, his ribs like powder, and the parts of his body that were unharmed were becoming less sensitive due to his deteriorating heat exhaustion. He could vaguely see his sidekicks shouting at him to get up, or perhaps at one another to plan the escape. He recognized the huge black blur that must have been the final Nomu across from him in the ruins of the town square, between the dripping drops of perspiration and misdirected blood. More fire. The beast croaked, waving its wings, one charred to the point where the membrane had disappeared and the other dotted with holes from an earlier hell spider. Given the limited intelligence, the question was probably more innocent than not, but to Endeavor's ears, it was disappointment and disrespect. The man who would overtake the #1 hero was aimed at him. "I refuse to let a brute beat me. Nobody is going to beat me. You're tough, monster. I'll give you that much. But try to regenerate from this." Endeavor roared as loudly as he could, his body heat melting the ground around and beneath him as he pushed himself to his feet and punched his fists together with renewed vigor, flames erupting from his costume and pseudo-mask. "Oi, Endeavor, we have civilian zones nearby," demanded Burnin, who was perspiring at the thought of Endeavor's full power, from the sidelines. He roared back, his silhouette disappearing behind a curtain of fire. "Then contain it. Why else are you here?" At that, with enough interest, the Nomu inclined its head. "Try this on for size. Prominence burn." Endeavor cried out even louder, and his whole body erupted in a massive blaze that ripped through the plaza with such ferocity that the stone itself sublimated. With the quirks, some of his sidekicks moved to control the blast, more to limit collateral damage than to concentrate it. But when the Nomu threw back its fist and punched hard enough to extinguish the flames and send Endeavor crashing through multiple buildings, it was all for nothing. as the flames themselves covered the surrounding buildings in orange. The pro heroes and sidekicks in the plaza were flung back from the shockwave. With the new fires already under control, Burnin commanded, "Goddammit! Control those fires, leave the villain to endeavor." Disregarding the hundreds of pounds of debris smothering his body, the number 2 hero exploded from the debris and almost let out another roar, this time in exasperation. Like him, it uses wind pressure. It already possesses similar strength and speed, and it now fights in a similar manner. I won't accept this, I can't. Endeavor dashed at the Nomu, launching a jet burn with a fury he doubted he had ever experienced before. By the end of the stream, its skin had already begun to regenerate from the sinew, and it sucked the attack. Undeterred, Endeavor swung his boots around the beast a couple of times and put his hands around its dome-shaped head. Endeavor smiled maniacally as the cerulean flames roared from his palms, unleashing a concentrated burst of fire similar to the one he'd used to kill the other black Nomu. The pro heroes inside screamed as the Nomu, regrettably, repeatedly elbowed him in the side before delivering a solid kidney shot. Endeavor's thrust kicked wildly as he released his grip and stopped his attack, but the Nomu had already shifted aside and put its own enormous hands around his head. Each blow left a scarlet stain on the concrete battlefield as it tossed Endeavor around like a ragdoll. Then it slammed him down one last time, with one hand so hard it cracked Endeavor's collarbone. The earth beneath it shattered with each blow as it used its other hand to unleash a torrent of bullet punches to the hero's head. Despite its inhuman endurance, the solid case surrounding its exposed brain had melted considerably, and the tissue underneath was visibly burned. Hot, need more, more. The Nomu finally gave in, throwing him aside and staggered up from its crouch while panting heavily. It then leapt into the air, leaving its opponent's shattered body behind. Gran Torino tumbled around inside the sphere, pushing himself into the side of the metal cage with his jets, making it wobble in midair. If his loud profanity was any indication, it gave him a number of new aches and pains but did nothing to stop its descent. With a pit in his stomach, the old hero was ready to run frantically up, or at least in the direction he believed to be up, in a desperate attempt to break out of the wiry prison. Isn't this going to hurt? He prepared his jets and started to push the air out, but something thudded against the cage, causing it to abruptly slow down to a comparatively gentle stop. All right? Torino touched his body, as though to make sure he was still alive. Then 2 big hands exploded through the metal, effortlessly tearing a hole in it. Have no fear, citizen. Why? Because I am, sir. Upon seeing his former mentor, All Might bowed and went to his knees. Gran Torino kicked his student's head lightly and winced. Why are you here, boy? And stand up before someone sees you. Yes. Sorry, sir, the symbol of peace exclaimed, still shaking, as he saluted. Torino sighed, either in relief or frustration, and sat against the cage to catch his breath. You didn't answer my question, he said. All Might relaxed as much as he could, but his eyes continued to dart around, looking for something, before he realized the significance of Torino's presence. All right, I saw what was happening on TV, so I rushed over. Wait, where's young Midoriya? He asked. The kid ran off with one of his classmates. Endeavor's brat, I think, the elder said, shrugging and clicking his tongue. How reckless, I'll be sure to reprimand him when I see him next. All Might's facepalm was the next move. The kid can handle himself, at least for a bit. Head to the town square first. Endeavor's fighting the mutants, last I saw. I suppose he wouldn't want me to, but I should head over to back him up, then. Suddenly, All Might's phone rang. He opened the screen and was about to put it away when he glared at the message, his eyes almost protruding from his skull. It's the commission. Endeavor's been defeated by another Nomu. There was a pause when the news was announced, and even though it was all done without much fanfare, the implications were devastating. For 6 brief years, Sorihiko believed that his student, his master's will, and the entire world were safer than they actually were. However, it felt good to be at peace for any period of time after living his entire life in fear of and at war with a phantom threat. Gran Torino's heart sank, however, as he pushed aside the thoughts that were racing through his mind in order to accomplish what he knew had to be done. Go, Toshinori. If this thing beat Endeavor, then you're probably the only that can stop it. All Might cracked his knuckles and rubbed his side, taking deep breaths. Sir, Eraser mentioned that the Nomu at USJ had several quirks. If they're strong enough to defeat Endeavor, then it's almost a given that he survived, he said hesitantly, turning to face his mentor. Torino's breath caught as he forced himself to swallow the bile and fear that were rising, but he was unable to speak because of a cold sweat that was drowning him out. At the very least, find young Midoriya. If All for One's alive, then he's the best shot at stopping him again. Gran Torino hissed, town square. G go. As his vision became blurry, possibly from anger, fear, or both. This is All Might. Clear all heroes from the area and set a perimeter around the villain. I'll handle this, All Might said, nodding and giving his teacher a quick pat on the shoulder before putting his phone to his ear and leaping toward the center of town.
I will continue the story in next part. Till then, bye bye.